Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The loft had seemed perfect during the virtual tour. 2 walls of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline, exposed brick that caught the afternoon light just right, and enough space to make the monthly rent feel almost reasonable. I'd signed the lease site unseen, desperate to escape my cramped studio and the neighbor who practiced violin at 3 in the morning. What the virtual tour hadn't shown was how the shadows moved here, independent of the sun. I noticed it my first noon in the place. I'd just set up my workstation, laptop humming on the reclaimed wood desk, when something cold crossed from the hallway into the living room. Not a breeze. The windows were sealed shut, the kind that don't open for safety reasons on the 14th floor. This was different, dense, purposeful. The temperature dropped maybe 10 degrees in the span of a heartbeat, and when it brushed past my shoulder, every hair on my forearm stood at attention like tiny soldiers sensing an ambush. The smart home system chimed. A pleasant female voice announced, "Presence detected in living area." I pulled up the app on my phone, expecting to see my own profile logged. Instead, the activity log showed 12:03 p.m., unknown identifier, living room motion sensor, activated. I told myself it was a glitch, new apartment, unfamiliar tech. These systems always needed time to calibrate. But my body knew better. That primitive part of the brain that evolution preserved to keep us alive. It screamed at me to leave, to pack up my laptop and work from a coffee shop, anywhere but here. I stayed. I had deadlines, and the Wi-Fi was exceptional. The building's basement storage area became my obsession by day 3. Each unit came with a small cage, chicken wire and padlocks, filled with the detritus of urban living. Mine was empty except for dust and a forgotten child's painting, the paper yellowed and curling at the edges, a house drawn in crayon, stick figures in the windows, and a name in careful block letters. Unit 1407. My unit. Beneath the painting, wrapped in plastic that crackled with age, was a security badge. The photo had faded to ghostly outlines, but the name was still legible. The tenant from 1407. According to the building management company's records, I'd called, claiming to be doing research on the building's history. He'd disappeared 7 years ago. Simply stopped paying rent. Stopped answering calls. When they'd finally entered the unit after the legal waiting period, everything was still there. Clothes in the closet, food rotting in the fridge, laptop open on the desk as if he'd just stepped out for coffee. They'd packed everything into storage, cleaned the unit, and rented it again. And again. And again. The property manager had laughed nervously when she'd told me I was the 9th tenant in 7 years. "People just seem to move on quickly from that unit," she'd said. "Better opportunities, you know how it is." I knew how it was becoming. The door started its games on day 5. Every time I approached it to leave, for groceries, for air, for sanity, the smart lock would engage from the inside. Just for a few seconds, never long enough to call maintenance about, but long enough to make my pulse quicken. The display would show "securing" in red letters while I stood there, laptop bag over my shoulder, keys in hand, waiting. Always waiting. And then I'd hear it. Or thought I heard it. A whisper just at the edge of perception, like someone speaking through water. Words I couldn't quite make out but felt in my chest. Vibrations that made my ribs ache. The lock would disengage with a soft click, and I'd flee into the hallway, telling myself I was being ridiculous while my hands shook. The work suffered. Video calls became torture. Clients would ask if someone else was in the room, claiming they saw movement behind me. I'd turn, see nothing but the brick wall and windows, Chicago spreading out below in its magnificent indifference. Once, during a presentation to a Fortune 500 company, my screen froze on a frame that showed me at my desk and something else. A darkness shaped almost like a person, standing just behind my chair. The client disconnected immediately. I lost the contract. I started working with my back to the wall, But that was worse. The sensation of being watched intensified, like fingers trailing across my neck, breath that wasn't mine warming the air around my ears. The smart home system logged presence after presence, always with that same unknown identifier, always in whatever room I'd just left. 2 weeks in, I cracked, started talking to it. "I'm just trying to work," I'd say to the empty apartment. "I'll be gone in 11 months and 2 weeks. Just let me work." The responses came in the form of the thermostat adjusting itself, lights dimming and brightening in patterns that felt like Morse code I couldn't decode, and once, just once, my laptop typing a single word while I was in the bathroom: "Stay." I deleted it immediately, but the word burned in my memory. Stay, not leave, not get out, stay. The paintings in storage multiplied, or maybe I just noticed more of them. Dozens, all by different hands, different ages of paper, all showing the same apartment from different angles, stick figures at windows, at desks, at doors that wouldn't open. Some had dates: 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. A gallery of obsession or warning, I couldn't tell which. I stopped sleeping normally, started working Chicago hours, then London hours, then Tokyo hours, chasing the sun around the globe from my desk, afraid of what the darkness might bring. But it didn't matter. Noon was always the worst. Every day at 12:03 p.m., that cold presence would make its journey from hallway to living room, growing stronger, more solid, more insistent. 3 weeks in, I understood, or thought I did. The previous tenant hadn't disappeared. He'd never left. Something in this place held him, holds all of them maybe. The smart home registered him because he was still here, still trying to leave, still being pulled back by whatever force lives in the bones of this building. I tested the theory. Set up cameras, motion sensors of my own, EMF readers I ordered online with overnight shipping that cost more than my groceries for a week. The results were consistent. Massive electromagnetic spikes at 12:03 p.m., temperature drops that shouldn't be possible with modern HVAC systems, and shapes in the infrared that looked almost human but not quite, like someone had tried to draw a person from memory and gotten the proportions wrong. The morning I decided to break the lease, the apartment fought back. The smart lock wouldn't disengage at all, not for seconds but for hours. I called maintenance, but their override codes didn't work. Called a locksmith, but his tools bent and broke against mechanisms that shouldn't exist in a residential lock. Finally, as the sun set, painting those glass walls orange and red, the lock opened on its own. I stumbled into the hallway, gulping air that tasted like freedom. But I came back. Of course I came back. My things were here, my work, my life such as it had become. And something else, a compulsion I couldn't name, like invisible threads pulling me back to Unit 1407. I'd stand in the hallway for hours, key in hand, trying to make myself go to a hotel, to a friend's place, anywhere else. But I always opened that door, always stepped inside, always sat back down at my desk. The laptop became my confessional. I documented everything. The sounds that weren't quite voices, the shadows that moved against physics, the growing certainty that I was being absorbed into whatever collection this place maintained. I uploaded the files to 3 different cloud services, encrypted and password protected, evidence of what was happening here, or evidence of my deterioration. Because that was the other possibility, wasn't it? That isolation and stress had finally cracked something fundamental in my mind, that I was experiencing a break from reality so complete that I'd constructed an elaborate haunting to explain my own dysfunction. The doctors I consulted via telehealth said as much, prescribed medications that made the edges of things fuzzy, but didn't stop the cold presence at 12:03. I found his laptop yesterday, the previous tenant's, hidden in a ventilation grate I'd never noticed before, wrapped in plastic like the badge. The battery was dead, but when I plugged it in, it booted immediately. His files were still there, documents dated after his supposed disappearance, thousands of them, all describing the same experiences I was having, all documenting the same slow dissolution of the barrier between self and place. His final entry was dated 3 days after the property management company said he'd vanished. It was just one line. I understand now. The building doesn't want us to leave. It wants us to stay. We're not tenants. We're collections. I've stopped trying to leave during the day. The door plays its games and I let it. I work when I can, though fewer clients call now. My family thinks I've become a recluse. Maybe I have. But every evening, when the sun sets and the shadows lengthen naturally instead of supernaturally, I stand at that door and ask permission. Please, I say to the empty air that isn't empty. Just for an hour. Just for some air. Sometimes it lets me go. I walk the streets of Chicago like a ghost myself, always within sight of the building, always feeling that pull back to the 14th floor. I buy groceries I barely eat, have conversations with store clerks who look through me more than at me, and count the minutes until I have to return. Because I always return. Before full dark, before the building starts calling in earnest, I'm back at my desk, typing these words, adding to the collection of documents that someone will find someday, wrapped in plastic in some hidden space, evidence of another tenant who didn't quite disappear, but didn't quite remain either. The smart home system just chimed. Multiple presences detected in living area. I'm alone, but the log shows 12 unknown identifiers now. 12 shadows crossing from hallway to living room. 12 cold spots that make my breath visible in the middle of a heated apartment. 12 somethings that might have been people once, before they became part of the building's permanent collection. I used to be an atheist, used to trust in the rational, the provable, the measurable. Now I close my laptop at 11:59 each morning and speak into the waiting silence. I'm still here. I'm still working. Please, just let me finish my lease. The whispers that come back might be agreement or amusement. I can't tell anymore. I've stopped trying to parse the words, stopped trying to understand what they want. I just work, and wait, and mark the days on a calendar that seems to be moving backward now, adding time to my sentence instead of subtracting it. 10 months and 3 weeks remain, or 10 years, or forever. Time moves differently in Unit 1407, flows in eddies and currents that have nothing to do with the clock on my laptop screen. Sometimes I look up from my work and the sun has set and risen and set again while I typed a single sentence. Sometimes a minute takes hours to pass, each second stretching like taffy, filled with the sound of breathing that isn't mine. I've started leaving my own paintings in the storage unit, abstract things, shapes that might be shadows or might be people or might be the spaces between both. I sign them with my unit number and the date, though I'm no longer certain what year it is. The building will keep them with the others, evidence of its collection, testimonies of the gathered. The property management company called yesterday, or last week, or last year. They wanted to know if I'd be renewing my lease. I laughed until the sound became something else, something the smart home system logged as unknown audio event, multiple sources detected. I don't think that's my decision anymore, I told them. They haven't called back. The noon ritual is about to begin. I can feel it building, that pressure in the air that comes before the cold crossing. Today feels different, though. Heavier, more purposeful. The shadows are already moving wrong, and it's only 11:57. My laptop screen keeps flickering, showing reflections of people who aren't there, or who are there but shouldn't be. I close the laptop now. I stand up from my desk, my body moving with a fluidity that doesn't feel entirely mine anymore. I walk to the center of the living room and wait, because waiting is what we do here. We wait, and we work, and we slowly become part of something larger than ourselves, something that needs us to stay, to bear witness, to add our presence to its endless inventory. I'm ready, I say to the gathering shadows, though I'm not sure if the words come from my mouth or theirs, or if there's a difference anymore. The cold arrives early today, not crossing from hallway to living room, but emerging from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. It doesn't brush past my shoulder this time. It stays. It settles. It sinks into my bones like it's coming home. The smart lock engages. Not for seconds, but for what might be forever. The pleasant voice announces, presence detected, presence cataloged, presence retained. I am the tenant who stayed, or will stay, or has always stayed. The building has made its choice, and I've made mine, though I can't remember when, or if there was ever really a choice at all. Somewhere in Chicago, a property management company is preparing to list Unit 1407 for rent again. The virtual tour will show those perfect windows, that exposed brick, the exceptional Wi-Fi. It won't show the shadows that move wrong or the cold that comes at noon, or the way the door holds you back just long enough to whisper its requirements. The next tenant will arrive soon. They always do. And I'll be here, part of the collection now. Another unknown identifier in the system. Another presence detected but never quite seen. Another voice in the whispers that explain the rules to those who think they're just renting an apartment when really, they're auditioning for something much more permanent. I should feel afraid. I should feel trapped. Instead, I feel archived, preserved, like a document saved to a drive that will never be formatted, never be erased, never be forgotten. The building remembers us all, and we, in turn, remember nothing else. Story 2. The desert wind carries whispers that aren't there. I learned this truth 3 weeks ago on a sandstone wall outside Moab, though I'm still trying to convince myself it was just the heat playing tricks on my mind. I'd driven out alone to test a new auto belay system I'd been developing, a pet project that could revolutionize solo climbing if I got the mechanics right. The route I'd chosen was moderate, nothing that should have given me trouble after 15 years of climbing. But routes don't care about your experience when they decide to teach you something. The morning sun painted the red rock in shades of blood and rust as I set up my gear. The auto belay clicked and whirred with mechanical precision, each sound echoing off the canyon walls like metallic prayers. I should have noticed then how the echoes lasted too long, how they seemed to bounce back changed, almost answered. Halfway up the route, reaching for a crimped hold in the negative angle section, I felt my foot blow. The rock crumbled like ancient bread, and for a heartbeat, I was falling. Not far, maybe 6 feet, but enough to snap an ankle on the ledge below, enough to end everything. Then pressure bloomed between my shoulder blades, firm, deliberate, like a palm pressed flat against my back, pushing me forward into the wall. My hand found the hold, my foot discovered a micro edge I hadn't seen, and I was stable again. Safe. Wind, I told myself. Desert thermals creating unusual pressure differentials. I'd felt stranger things in the mountains, but wind doesn't breathe. And I heard it then, right beside my ear, through the vents of my helmet. A slow, measured exhalation that smelled of chalk and something else. Something mineral and old. My hands trembled as I continued up, each move now feeling watched, guided. The auto belay hummed below, but there was another sound layered beneath it. A rhythmic clicking that matched no mechanism I knew, like carabiners opening and closing, like someone checking gear. At the top, shaking from more than exertion, I found it partially buried in decades of dust. An old tubular webbing anchor, sun-bleached but solid. Someone had scratched words into the aluminum rappel ring, "Stay on belay." The metal was worn smooth everywhere except those letters, which looked fresh cut. Beside it, a vintage carabiner gleamed as if someone had polished it that morning, though the dust around it was undisturbed. I rappelled fast, packed faster, and drove back to town with my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. That night in my motel room, I researched the route on my laptop until my eyes burned. Forum posts from the early 2000s, route descriptions, climbing guides dating back to the 80s. Then I found it. A single mention in an archived accident report from 1987. A solo climber, same route, same section where I'd felt my foot blow. They found him at the base with a shattered ankle, delirious, claiming someone had pushed him off the wall when he tried to skip clipping a crucial piece of protection. He survived, barely, but never climbed again. The route's name appeared in only one old guidebook, The Believer's Test. I should have stayed away. Should have forgotten the whole thing. But climbers are stupid about unfinished business. And I had to know. Had to understand what had happened up there. I went back 4 days later, early enough that the parking area was empty except for the wind-carved silence. This time, I brought a traditional rack, planning to place my own protection instead of relying entirely on the auto belay. As I approached the wall, I noticed something I'd missed before. Old bolt holes, dozens of them, filled with epoxy. Someone had climbed this route many times, protecting it differently each time, then sealed their tracks. The first pitch went smoothly. Too smoothly. Every hold appeared exactly where I needed it. Every foot placement revealed itself at the perfect moment. It felt like climbing in a flow state, except I wasn't flowing. I was being pulled along, directed like a marionette. At the negative angle section, I hesitated. My new plan was to place a cam here, backup protection in case of another foot blow. As my hand moved toward my rack, that pressure returned. Not on my back this time, but on my wrist. Firm, insistent. The message was clear. Trust the system. Stay on belay. I tried to reach for the camera anyway. The pressure increased, not painful, but undeniable. My hand was pushed back to the rock, and in my peripheral vision, just at the edge of my helmet's range, I saw it. A shadow where no shadow should be. A shape that moved independent of me, independent of the sun. The breathing came again, closer this time. Not behind, but beside me, matching my rhythm, anticipating my moves. When I reached right, the breathing shifted left, maintaining balance I couldn't see. When I flagged my leg for stability, something brushed against my calf, steadying it in place. I wanted to scream, to let go, to fall and take my chances with gravity rather than whatever shared this wall with me. But the pressure wouldn't allow it. Each time my grip loosened in panic, those invisible hands, for I couldn't deny anymore what they were, would press my fingers back onto the holds. Firm, patient, inexorable. Near the top I made a decision. I would skip the last bolt, traverse left-off route, and down-climb an easier variation I'd spotted. The moment the thought formed, the pressure turned violent. Not harmful. I need to be clear about this, but commanding. My helmet was gripped and turned forward. My hips were squared to the wall, and in my ear, so close I felt lips brush the foam padding, came a whisper that wasn't wind. No shortcuts. I finished the route properly, clipping every piece of protection, following the established line. At the top, the old anchor waited, but this time there was something else. A weather-beaten notebook in a Ziploc bag, wedged behind a flake of rock. Inside, dates going back 40 years. Names. And beside each name, the same phrase. Stayed on belay. My hand shook as I added my name and the date. As I wrote, I felt approval, a warmth between my shoulder blades like a pat on the back. Like someone saying good job without words. I've been back 11 times now. I tell myself it's to test refinements to my auto belay system, but that's a lie I don't even believe. I go back because I have to, because something up there won't let me stay away. Each time the presence is stronger, more distinct. I've started to recognize its patterns, how it shifts weight when I do, how it breathes harder on the crux moves, how it makes a soft clicking sound with its tongue when I'm off route. Last week I saw its shadow clearly for the first time. Elongated, moving with practiced efficiency, wearing gear that hasn't been manufactured since the 1970s. The locals know something. I've caught them watching me at the gear shop, exchanging glances when I mention where I'm climbing. One old-timer, drunk enough to talk at the bar last night, told me the route's named after someone who doesn't make mistakes anymore. When I pressed for details, he just smiled sadly and said some teachers never retire. They just change classrooms. I looked up death records for the area. Climbing accidents. There are none for that route. Not one. Hundreds of climbers over decades, including novices who had no business on that grade, and not a single fatality. Injuries, yes, but only when people tried to cut corners, skip protection, or solo without proper backup. And in every injury report, the same detail. The climber felt pushed or pulled at the crucial moment, preventing worse damage. This morning, I found something that made my blood run cold. In the 1976 American Alpine Journal, a trip report from a local climbing club, they mention attempting an unnamed route on the western face that matches the location perfectly. Their description ends with this: "We retreated after our lead climber reported feeling accompanied on the wall. The experience was deemed too psychologically intense to continue." But there's a photo, grainy, black and white, shot from below. It shows a climber on the route, right at the negative angle section where I first felt the pressure. The climber is looking up, one hand reaching for a hold. There are two shadows on the wall. Tomorrow, I'm going back again. I've tried to stop, deleted the route from my guidebook app, gave away the specific gear I use for it, even booked trips to other climbing areas. But I wake up at 3 a.m. with my hands already taped, my rack already organized, my car keys in my hand. The pressure between my shoulder blades doesn't go away until I'm driving toward Moab. The thing is, I'm becoming a better climber. My footwork has improved dramatically. My route reading is intuitive now, almost prescient. I place protection exactly where it needs to be. Never too much, never too little. Other climbers have started commenting on it, asking what changed, what training program I'm following. I don't tell them about the teacher who won't let me fall, the guardian who demands perfection not through cruelty, but through absolute, unwavering insistence on doing things right. I don't tell them that sometimes on other routes now, I feel that familiar pressure warning me before a hold breaks or guiding me toward better beta. I don't tell them that last week, on a different wall entirely, I heard someone free soloing above me cry out in fear, and I swear I felt that presence leave me for 30 seconds. Just long enough for a stranger's shadow to suddenly have company, just long enough for them to find their grip again. The desert wind carries whispers that aren't there, but maybe they are there. Maybe they've always been there, waiting for climbers who need to learn that the mountain doesn't care about your ego, your shortcuts, or your hurry. It only cares that you come back down alive. Tonight, packing my gear for tomorrow's visit, I found something in my chalk bag I didn't put there. An old piton, style from the 1960s, polished to a mirror shine. Etched on its side are coordinates and a date, the location of that route and tomorrow's date. Below that, two words that make my hands shake: teaching position. I understand now. The presence on that wall isn't just protecting climbers, it's selecting them, training them, preparing them for something. And tomorrow, I have a feeling I'm going to graduate. The pressure between my shoulder blades is warm tonight, almost proud. When I close my eyes, I can almost see him, the original believer, the one who never left the rock, the one who found a way to stay on belay forever. He's waiting for me to understand the final lesson, the one you can only learn when you're ready to teach it yourself. I won't die on that route. No one does. That's not what it takes from you. It takes your ability to leave. And the worst part, the absolute worst part that keeps me awake, staring at the ceiling while my climbing shoes wait by the door, I don't want to leave anymore. The mountain needs its teachers. Someone has to stay on belay. Someone has to make sure the next generation of climbers learns the most important rule. There are no shortcuts on the wall. You climb it right, or the mountain teaches you why. Tomorrow, when I add my name to that notebook for the last time, I wonder if I'll write the date, or if I'll just write always. The pressure between my shoulder blades feels like agreement, like welcome, like home. I can hear the desert wind outside my window, and it carries whispers that are definitely there. They're saying one word over and over, in a voice that sounds more like mine with each repetition: stay. Story 3. The forest doesn't forget. That's what I keep telling myself now, 3 weeks after we found that place. My brother-in-law still won't talk about it, just stares at his coffee when I bring it up, fingers drumming that same nervous pattern on the table. Tap, tap, scrape, tap, tap, scrape, like chains dragging across stone. We'd been hired to map forgotten trails in the North Carolina Appalachians for a hiking website that specialized in undiscovered gems. The irony isn't lost on me now. Some things should stay undiscovered. It was early October, that perfect window when the leaves turn, but the cold hasn't settled in yet. We'd been following what might have been an old logging road, long reclaimed by undergrowth and fallen timber. My GPS unit beeped steadily, recording our path while my brother-in-law marked notable features on his tablet. We'd done this dozens of times before, pleasant work that paid well enough and got us outdoors. The dry creek bed appeared around noon. The drought had been severe that year, leaving most waterways reduced to rocky scars through the forest floor. But this one was different. The stones weren't scattered randomly like nature tends to arrange them. They formed patterns, concentric circles that reminded me of ripples frozen in rock, all radiating from a central point about 30 feet ahead. My brother-in-law noticed it first, the sinkhole at the center of those stone rings. It was geometrically perfect, about 8 feet in diameter, edges so smooth they looked machined. The walls disappeared into darkness that our flashlights couldn't penetrate, as if the light just stopped. But what made my skin crawl were the marks on the surrounding stones, deep grooves carved in spirals, like something massive had twisted its way up from below or down from above. The grooves were fresh, edges sharp enough to cut paper, yet covered in that thin film of moisture that suggested age. I knelt to get a closer look, running my fingers along one of the spiral marks. The stone felt wrong, too warm for October, with a texture that seemed to shift under my touch. Rough 1 second, smooth the next. My GPS unit started acting up then, the altitude reading flickering between our actual elevation and negative numbers that shouldn't have been possible. -300 feet, -800, -2,000 before the screen went black and reset. That's when the first tree fell. No wind, no warning, just a sharp crack like a gunshot, and a massive oak 20 yards to our left toppled forward, its trunk snapping clean at the base. The sound echoed wrong in that hollow, bouncing back at us from angles that didn't match the geography. Before we could process what happened, another tree fell, then another, each one closer than the last, forming a deliberate line through the forest toward where we stood. My brother-in-law grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Neither of us spoke. We just watched as tree after tree came down in perfect sequence, opening a corridor through the dense forest. The path they created led directly from the sinkhole to us, then continued past, disappearing into the shadowed depths of the woods. The precision was impossible, branches interlocking like fingers, creating an archway overhead that filtered the sunlight into patterns I couldn't quite focus on. The metallic sound started then, deep beneath our feet, rhythmic and deliberate, clank, drag, like chains being pulled through pipes, or massive gears grinding against rust. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating up through the soles of our boots. I felt it in my teeth, in the hollow of my chest. My brother-in-law later said he heard something different. Voices speaking backwards, he claimed, though he could never explain what they said. The forest had gone completely silent except for that underground mechanical rhythm. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of leaves. The air felt thick, oppressive, like breathing through wet cloth. I noticed movement in my peripheral vision, shadows sliding between the standing trees, always just out of direct sight. When I turned to look, nothing. But the feeling of being watched pressed against us from all sides. We needed to leave. The thought came to both of us simultaneously, that sudden animal certainty that we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when we turned back the way we'd come, the path had changed. The fallen trees that had created our corridor were somehow different, closer together, branches now interwoven so tightly, we'd have to crawl through gaps to escape. And those gaps, they looked deliberate, sized perfectly for a human body to squeeze through, one at a time. My brother-in-law tried first, dropping to his hands and knees to crawl through the nearest opening. Halfway through, he stopped. His body went rigid, and I heard him make a sound I'd never heard from him before. Not quite a gasp, not quite a whimper. When he backed out, his face was pale, eyes wide and unfocused. He wouldn't tell me what he'd seen on the other side. Still won't. We decided to follow the newly opened corridor instead, moving away from the sinkhole. Each step felt monitored, measured. The metallic sounds beneath us shifted, matching our pace perfectly, clank drag with each footfall, as if we were walking on top of some vast mechanism that responded to our presence. About 100 yards in, I noticed the trees beginning to move. Not falling this time, growing. Roots emerged from the earth like tentacles, weaving across the path we'd just walked. Branches stretched and groaned, reaching across the corridor to meet their counterparts on the opposite side. The forest was closing the path behind us, sealing it with deliberate intent. We picked up our pace, but the closure matched us perfectly, always staying about 10 feet behind, never gaining, never falling back. The sunlight started doing impossible things. Shadows fell at angles that defied the sun's position. Some trees cast multiple shadows in different directions. Others cast none at all. My GPS unit, when it worked, showed us moving in directions we weren't traveling, accumulating distance we hadn't covered. At one point, it claimed we were 8 miles from where we'd started, though we'd walked maybe half a mile at most. The smell hit us next. Ozone and copper and something organic but wrong, like meat left in standing water. It came in waves, strongest when the underground sounds peaked. My brother-in-law started recording video on his phone, panning it around the shifting forest. When we watched it later, the footage showed a completely different place. A normal forest path on a sunny day. No fallen trees, no closing corridor. But the audio captured things we hadn't heard at the time. Whispers in a language that hurt to listen to, and underneath it all, my own voice saying things I never said, describing things I'd never seen. We emerged from the woods 4 hours later, though my watch insisted only 40 minutes had passed. The trail we'd originally followed was gone, replaced by thick undergrowth that looked decades old. Our car was where we'd left it, but covered in a fine layer of pollen that shouldn't have existed in October. The GPS unit's memory was corrupted, but what data remained showed our path, a route that made no geometric sense, with elevation changes that put us simultaneously above and below ground level. There were coordinates recorded for locations miles from where we'd been, timestamps that preceded our arrival by hours. The next morning, my brother-in-law found something in his jacket pocket, a stone from near the sinkhole, one he swore he hadn't taken. It was smooth and warm, with one of those spiral grooves carved into its surface. When he tried to throw it away, it appeared in his pocket again the next day, and the next. He stopped trying after a week. I told him to keep it. Some things, once taken, can't be given back. The rescue team contacted us 8 days later. A biology professor from the state university had gone missing in the exact area we'd mapped. They wanted our GPS data, our notes, anything that might help. We gave them everything we had, but I knew it wouldn't matter. They found the professor's equipment 3 days later, scattered along a trail that didn't match any of our maps. They never found him. His GPS unit, they said, showed something strange in its final recorded coordinates, a depth reading that put him 300 feet below the surface, though he'd been hiking on level ground. The last photo on his camera was completely black, except for a series of circular patterns that looked like ripples in dark water, or stone rings around a perfect hole. I've gone back to check the map since then. The area where we found the sinkhole doesn't match any geological survey. It shouldn't exist. The bedrock there is wrong for that kind of formation. But I found other things. Historical records from the 1920s mention a mining operation that shut down after workers reported hearing machinery sounds from shafts they hadn't dug. Indigenous stories from the region talk about places where the earth corrects mistakes, though they never specify whose mistakes or what happens to them. My brother-in-law and I don't hike together anymore. He says the forest feels different now, like it recognizes him. Trees fall too often when he's hiking, always in patterns that seem almost meaningful. His GPS never works right. And sometimes on quiet nights, he says he can still hear that metallic sound, distant but getting closer, like something vast and patient working its way up from below. I know what he means. Last week I was reviewing our old files and found something I'd missed, a photo I don't remember taking. It shows the sinkhole from directly above, but the angle is impossible. We never climbed any trees. In the darkness at the bottom of the hole, if I adjust the contrast just right, there might be shapes, geometric patterns that repeat in ways that make my eyes water. Or maybe it's just shadow and suggestion, my mind creating patterns where none exist. The stone my brother-in-law found still sits on his desk. Sometimes I catch him running his finger along the spiral groove, tracing the pattern over and over, around and down, around and down. He says it helps him think, though he can never remember what about. The groove seems deeper now than when he first found it, or maybe it's his finger wearing down. I've stopped asking. 3 nights ago, I got a call from the rescue team coordinator. Another hiker had gone missing, this time an experienced guide who knew the area well. His last communication was a text message. The trees are showing me something. They found his phone the next morning. Its GPS showing accumulated travel of over 200 miles in a single night, all of it in perfect circles around coordinates that matched our sinkhole. They want us to guide them back to the area. The coordinator says they need people who've been there before, who understand the terrain. I haven't told him that the terrain doesn't want to be understood. That understanding might be the problem. My brother-in-law refuses to go. He's probably right. But I'm going anyway. Tomorrow morning, I'm driving back to those mountains with a team of searchers who have no idea what they're looking for. I keep thinking about those circular patterns in the stone, how they looked like ripples moving outward. Or maybe inward, maybe both at once. The forest doesn't forget, and I'm starting to think it doesn't forgive either. It just corrects. Over and over, with mechanical precision and infinite patience, it corrects whatever it perceives as wrong. The question that keeps me awake at night, the one I can't stop turning over in my mind like my brother-in-law traces that spiral groove, is simple. What if we're the mistake it's trying to fix? The stone on my brother-in-law's desk was warm when I touched it yesterday. Warmer than it should be. And when I pulled my hand away, I swear I felt it pull back, just slightly, like a magnet in reverse, or like something testing its grip. I leave in 6 hours. My GPS is fully charged, though I doubt it will work correctly. I've told my family I'll be back in 3 days. The coordinator thinks we'll find something this time, some clue to the disappearances. He's right, of course. We'll find something. I just don't think we'll understand it when we do. And maybe that's the point. Maybe understanding was never meant for us. Maybe we're just the medium through which something else expresses itself, like grooves carved in stone, spiraling down into darkness that our lights can't penetrate. The forest remembers everything, and tomorrow, I'm walking back into its memory. Story 4. The fluorescent lights above Pump 3 had been flickering for 6 weeks when he walked in. I remember that detail because I'd been counting the nights, marking them in the margin of my crossword puzzles. 42 tallies, 42 shifts watching that damn light strobe against the New Jersey darkness. It matters now, that counting. It matters because I need to know when things started changing, when the world began tilting just slightly off its axis. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know because I'd just finished wiping down the coffee station and glanced at the security monitor displaying the timestamp. The bell above the door chimed its familiar 2-note warning, and cold October air rushed in, carrying the smell of distant rain and motor oil. The man wore a navy baseball cap pulled low, the bill shadowing his features. Nothing unusual there. Half my late-night customers preferred anonymity. But something about the way he moved made me straighten behind the counter. He didn't walk so much as glide, each step calculated, deliberate. His eyes swept the store in a pattern I recognized from my own paranoid moments. Cameras first, then mirrors, then exits. Professional, practiced. He selected a pack of gum and a bottle of water, movements economical, purposeful. When he approached the counter, I caught a glimpse of his jaw, clean-shaven, angular, unremarkable. The kind of face you'd forget immediately if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention. I always paid attention during the night shift. 20 on Pump 5, he said, voice flat, neutral. Midwest accent maybe, or perhaps no accent at all. the kind of voice news anchors cultivate. He handed me a credit card. The name read, Michael Morrison. I ran it through, handed it back with his receipt. He signed, pocketed the card, and pulled out another one. Actually, make it 40. This card said, David Chen. Different bank, different state. My hand hesitated for just a moment before taking it. Our eyes met briefly. His were gray, like old concrete, and utterly empty of recognition or concern. He knew I'd noticed. He didn't care. The transaction completed in silence. He took his items, nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible dip of his chin, and left. I watched him on the monitors as he pumped his gas, noting how he positioned himself. He never once appeared on the external cameras. Not fully. An arm here, a shoulder there, but never his face. Never enough for identification. He knew exactly where our cameras pointed, knew their range down to the inch. The next morning I was heating up leftover pizza and watching the news when his face filled my TV screen. The photo was grainy, clearly from a security camera, but it was him. No question. The reporters spoke in urgent tones about a manhunt, about stolen identities, about cars found abandoned with swapped plates across 3 states. They called him the Ghost. Unoriginal, but apt. He'd been moving through Jersey for 2 weeks, they said. 2 weeks of near misses and cold trails. I should have called the police immediately. Should have reported the encounter, handed over our security footage. Instead, I found myself driving back to the station, using my key to let myself into the back office where we kept the recordings. I sat in that cramped, coffee-stained room and watched the footage from the previous night. There I was, clear as day, talking to someone at the counter, handing change to empty air, nodding at nothing. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m., exactly when I remembered him being there. But the video showed only me, alone, performing a transaction with no one. My hands shook as I checked the other cameras. The one facing the door showed it opening and closing on its own. The pump camera revealed gas being dispensed, the numbers climbing on the display, but no car, no person, nothing but October wind disturbing the trash near the pumps. I drove home in a daze, questions spinning through my mind. Had I imagined him? But no. I had the receipts, both of them, with different names and signatures. They were real, tangible proof that someone had been there. Unless I'd written them myself. Unless I'd run my own cards without remembering. That night I returned for my shift as usual, though nothing felt usual anymore. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound sharper. Around midnight, I found the first note. It was tucked under the register, written on the back of a receipt in handwriting I didn't recognize. Stop looking at the cameras. I hadn't told anyone about reviewing the footage. The next few nights blurred together in a haze of paranoia and exhaustion. I'd find things moved, products shifted on shelves, my crossword puzzle filled in with answers I didn't remember writing, the coffee I'd just made already half drunk. The security stickers we used to seal the storage room kept appearing torn and replaced, always perfectly aligned, as if someone was practicing entering and leaving without detection. Then came the night I heard my own voice. I was restocking the chips aisle when I heard it, muffled but unmistakable coming from outside. My voice, engaged in conversation. I crept to the window, peered out into the parking lot lit by those harsh sodium lights. Nothing. But the voice continued, casual and calm, discussing the weather with someone who responded in tones too low to make out. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and held it up to the window. For 3 minutes, I recorded my own voice having a conversation I wasn't having, outside where I wasn't standing, with someone who might not exist. When I played it back later, there was only silence. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and my own breathing, rapid and shallow. The storage room became my obsession. Every morning after my shift, I'd check those security stickers, photograph them, compare them to the previous day's images. They were different, always subtly different. The angle of a tear, the position of an air bubble. Someone was entering that room regularly. I started leaving tests. A hair placed across the door seal. Dust sprinkled on the floor in specific patterns. pencil marks on the wall at exact measurements. They were always disturbed, always changed, but the cameras never showed anyone entering or leaving except me. One night, I decided to hide in the storage room. I told myself I'd catch whoever was doing this, prove I wasn't losing my mind. I wedged myself behind a stack of boxes, turned off my phone, and waited in the absolute darkness. Hours passed. My legs cramped, my back ached, but I remained still, breathing shallow, listening. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard the door open. No light entered. Whoever it was didn't need it. Footsteps, soft and measured, moved through the room. Boxes shifted, papers rustled, and then, worst of all, breathing. Slow, rhythmic breathing that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I wanted to leap out, confront whoever it was, but my body wouldn't move. Terror had locked every muscle, every joint. The breathing continued, circling me, pausing occasionally as if the breather was examining something closely. Once I could have sworn I felt breath on the back of my neck, warm and damp, but that was impossible given how I was positioned. Then, my own voice spoke from across the room. "You should have called the police." Not similar to my voice, exactly. The same timbre, the same slight rasp from too many late-night cigarettes, the same way I pronounced police with a soft S sound. "But you didn't," my voice continued, "because you knew. Some part of you knew that the cameras don't lie. They show what's real, and what's real is that you've been alone every night, talking to yourself, writing those receipts, leaving those notes." I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood, using the pain to keep from screaming. "The question is," my voice mused, moving closer, "are you hiding from me, or am I hiding from you?" The door opened and closed. Silence descended again, thick and oppressive. I stayed frozen for another hour before finally crawling out, my joints screaming in protest. The room looked exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. A new note on top of the boxes where I'd been hiding. "Don't come back." But I did come back. Of course I did. Where else would I go? This job, this routine, this night shift, it was all I had. And maybe that's what he'd counted on. Maybe that's why he'd chosen my station, my shift, my tired face behind bulletproof glass at 3 a.m. The incidents escalated. I'd find myself in places I didn't remember going. The bathroom when I'd sworn I was at the register. Outside by the dumpsters when I'd just been mopping. Once I discovered I'd apparently spent an hour organizing the storage room, creating a complex system I didn't understand, labeled with codes that meant nothing to me but felt important. Urgent. The other employees started avoiding me. Day shift would arrive to find elaborate messages written in coffee grounds on the counter, security footage of me standing perfectly still for hours, staring at nothing, or worse, having animated conversations with empty air, gesturing wildly, even laughing at jokes no one else could hear. My manager called me in, showed me the footage. There I was, clear as day, acting out both sides of an argument, changing my position and posture for each character. In one particularly disturbing clip, I appeared to be teaching someone how to avoid the cameras, demonstrating the blind spots with rehearsed precision. "I think you need help," she said gently. "This job, the isolation, it can get to people." But I knew what I knew. The receipts were real. The credit cards had been processed. The transactions were in our system. 2 different cards, 2 different names, both used at exactly 2:47 a.m. on that Tuesday night. Unless I went home and checked my own wallet. There, tucked behind my driver's license, were 2 credit cards I'd never seen before. Michael Morrison, David Chen, both with my signature on the back, practiced and perfect. The next morning's news brought a development in the ghost case. He'd been spotted at a rest stop 50 miles south, same MO, same pattern of swapped plates and stolen identities. But the photograph they showed was different this time, clearer. The face was familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. It was almost my face. Not exactly. The jaw was wrong, the nose slightly different, but close enough that in grainy security footage, in the right light, with the right angle. I called in sick that night, and the next, and the next. But staying away from the station didn't help. I'd find notes in my apartment, written in that same unfamiliar handwriting that might have been mine. The storage closet in my building had new security stickers each morning, perfectly aligned. My voice echoed from rooms I wasn't in, having conversations about things I didn't understand. Routes through the city, camera placements, shift schedules at places I'd never been. Last night, I woke up at 2:47 a.m. to find myself fully dressed, car keys in hand, standing at my front door. My phone showed an unsent text to a number I didn't recognize. Position compromised, moving to secondary location. I deleted it and went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there thinking about that man in the baseball cap, about his empty concrete eyes, about how he'd known exactly where to stand to avoid being seen. I thought about how tired I was, how the fluorescent lights at the station had been flickering for exactly 6 weeks, how I'd been counting the nights like a prisoner marking time. 42 nights, 42 shifts. And on the 43rd, he'd walked in. Or had he? Had anyone walked in at all? This morning, I found a new credit card in my wallet. The name on it is nobody I recognize, but the signature on the back is perfect, practiced. Tonight, at 2:47 a.m., I know I'll be somewhere, talking to someone who might not exist, avoiding cameras I've never studied, playing a role in a story I don't understand. The ghost, they called him. Moving through Jersey, leaving cold trails and near misses. Never caught on camera, not fully. Just fragments, pieces, suggestions of a presence that might not be there at all. I've stopped checking the news. I've stopped looking for his face, which might be my face, which might be no one's face at all. I've accepted that at 2:47 a.m., something happens. Something that involves me but isn't me. Something that the cameras can't quite capture. Something that leaves receipts and credit cards and notes in handwriting that could be mine if I didn't think about it too hard. The fluorescent lights in my apartment have started flickering. I've begun counting the nights, marking tallies in the margins of crossword puzzles I don't remember buying. When I reach 42, I wonder who will walk through my door. I wonder if I'll recognize him. I wonder if he'll be wearing my face, or if I've been wearing his all along. The note I found this morning was different from the others. Same handwriting that might be mine, but the message was new. Stop fighting it. You've always known how to disappear. Maybe he's right. Maybe I have always known. Maybe that's why I took the night shift in the first place, why I chose the job where you can go hours without seeing another soul, where you can practice being invisible, being nobody, being a ghost. Tonight I'm going back to the station, not for my shift. I've been fired, apparently, though I don't remember that conversation. I'm going back because at 2:47 a.m., I need to be at pump 5. I need to stand in exactly the right spot, the spot where the cameras can't quite see, where reality gets thin and you can slip through into something else. I've been practicing in mirrors, learning to not recognize my own face. It's easier than you'd think. After a while, the features blur, become generic, forgettable. The kind of face that could belong to anyone or no one at all. The receipts in my pocket have names I don't recognize. The credit cards in my wallet belong to people who might not exist. And somewhere, in a gas station in New Jersey, a night shift worker is counting the flickering lights, marking time until someone walks through his door. 42 nights. That's how long it takes, apparently. 42 nights of practice, of learning the cameras, of becoming invisible. On the 43rd night, you're ready. Ready to walk into someone else's life, to stand in their blind spots, to leave them questioning their own reality. Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps me awake, that makes my hands shake as I write this, maybe it only takes one night. Maybe the other 42 are just you, trying to remember which side of the counter you're supposed to be on, which face you're supposed to be wearing, which name you're supposed to sign. The man in the Navy baseball cap knew exactly where to stand. He knew because he'd been there before. He'd been there every night for 42 nights, standing behind the counter, watching himself walk in again and again, each time with a different name, a different card, the same empty concrete eyes. I know because I've been there too. I'm there right now, even as I write this in my apartment. I'm at the register, watching myself pump gas at pump 5, standing precisely where the cameras can't see, where I've always stood, where I'll always stand, at 2:47 a.m., every night, forever. The fluorescent lights flicker. I make another tally mark. Tonight makes 43. Story 5. The receipt sits in my wallet even now, creased and yellowed at the edges like old bone. I can feel its weight against my hip as I write this, heavier than paper should be. Order number 0. Time, 12 a.m. The exact minute my phone died that night 3 months ago. I should explain how it started, though I'm not sure started is the right word. Things like this don't really begin. They just reveal themselves, like stains spreading through fabric you didn't know was already soiled. It was a Tuesday night in late September, and I was driving back from a failed date in Riverside. The kind where you both know within 10 minutes it's going nowhere, but you sit through 2 hours anyway out of politeness. My phone had been at 3% when I left the restaurant, and somewhere along the 91 it finally gave up. No GPS, no music, just me and the hum of tires on asphalt. I knew there was a Jack in the Box off the Chapman exit, one of those 24-hour locations that become strange islands of fluorescent light in the suburban darkness. My stomach was churning, not from hunger but from that peculiar emptiness that comes after forced conversation. Still, I needed something normal, something routine to reset the evening. The parking lot was empty except for a single streetlight that kept flickering, throwing the building in and out of shadow like a slow strobe. The drive-through menu board glowed that familiar yellow-white, and I pulled up to the speaker, rolling down my window to the thick September air that smelled of distant brush fires and hot asphalt cooling. The voice came immediately, before I'd even fully stopped. Not the usual bored teenager's greeting, but something warmer, almost intimate, like someone leaning close to share a secret. Welcome back. The usual tonight? I sat there for a moment, engine idling. I'd never been to this particular location before. The voice continued without waiting for my response, syllables flowing with an odd rhythm that made my teeth ache. 2 tacos, no lettuce. Large curly fries, extra crispy. Medium Coke, light ice. Is that correct? My mouth went dry. That was exactly what I'd been planning to order. Not just tonight, it's what I always ordered at Jack in the Box, had been ordering for years. The same combination, the same modifications. But there was no way they could know that. How did you? I started, but the voice cut through, gentle but insistent. Please pull forward to the window. Your total is $7.83. That was wrong. Even without doing the math, I knew it should be more. Prices had gone up recently. Everything cost more than $7.83 these days. But I found myself putting the car in drive, creeping forward along the building's edge. The window should have been 20 feet ahead, glowing with interior light, probably with someone in a headset, waiting with their hand already out for payment. Instead, there was only darkness. Not the regular darkness of a closed restaurant, but something denser, like looking into water at night. I stopped the car and leaned forward, squinting. The window was there. I could make out its frame, but it was covered from the inside, not with curtains or blinds, but with what looked like chains. Dozens of small padlocks hung from them, catching the flickering streetlight like tiny eyes. My rational mind tried to assert itself. They must be closed. Some kind of security measure. But closed restaurants don't take orders. The speaker had been clear, the menu board illuminated. And now, as I sat there with my engine running, I could see something else through the darkened glass. The orange glow of fryer lights, still on, still hot. A mechanical whir made me jump. From a slot beneath the chained window, something emerged. A white paper bag, pristine and folded at the top. Next to it, a drink sweating condensation despite the warm night. And finally, sliding out like a tongue, a receipt. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, though it felt longer. The smart thing would be to drive away, leave the food, leave this wrong-feeling place, get back on the freeway and forget this happened. Instead, I reached out and took the bag. It was hot. Not warm, but hot enough that I almost dropped it. Through the paper, I could feel the contents shifting, and something else. A dampness that wasn't grease, something that made the bag stick slightly to my palm. The drink was ice cold, painful to hold, frost spreading across the cup in patterns that looked almost like writing. The receipt came away from the slot with a soft tearing sound, as if it had been attached to something. Under the dim interior light, I could read it clearly. Order number 0. Time, 12 a.m. server. Blank items. More time. Total, $7.83. Thank you for waiting. My name was printed at the bottom. Not typed, but printed in neat handwriting I didn't recognize. I drove away faster than I should have, tires squealing slightly as I turned back onto Chapman. The bag sat in my passenger seat, and I swear I could see it moving slightly, expanding and contracting like it was breathing. The drink had already soaked through the cup holder with condensation that smelled wrong, metallic and sweet, like old pennies in sugar water. 3 blocks away, I pulled into a gas station and parked under the bright canopy lights. My hands were shaking as I opened the bag. Inside were 2 tacos, wrapped in paper that was slightly too white, slightly too smooth. The curly fries were there too, but they were arranged in a pattern, a perfect spiral that hadn't shifted despite my driving. At the center of the spiral was something else, a key, small, brass, old-fashioned, the kind that might open a diary or a music box. I didn't eat the food. I couldn't. Instead, I threw it all in the gas station dumpster, except for the receipt and the key. Those went in my wallet, and I told myself I was keeping them as evidence. Evidence of what? I wasn't sure. The next evening, I called the police. Not 911. That seemed too dramatic. Just the non-emergency line. I explained what had happened, tried to keep my voice steady and rational. The dispatcher was polite but confused. There were no reports of anything unusual at that location. No break-ins, no calls, nothing. She suggested maybe I'd encountered some kids playing a prank, though her tone suggested she thought I might be the one playing games. I had to know. Had to go back. So the next night, Wednesday, I returned. The Jack-in-the-Box was open, blazing with normal light. Cars moved through the drive-thru. Inside, I could see employees in their uniforms, customers at tables. Everything exactly as it should be. I went inside. The manager was a middle-aged woman who looked tired, but listened patiently as I explained what had happened the night before. Her expression shifted from polite interest to genuine confusion. "We were closed Tuesday night," she said. "Emergency electrical maintenance. The whole plaza was dark from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I showed her the receipt. She studied it, frowning at the impossibly neat handwriting, the order number 0, the timestamp. Then she did something that made my skin crawl. She sniffed it. Just a quick inhale, but her face went pale. Without a word, she led me to the back office. The security monitor showed multiple camera angles, and she pulled up the footage from Tuesday night. We watched together as the timestamp approached midnight. The cameras showed the empty restaurant, the dark kitchen, the vacant drive-thru. At exactly 12 a.m., the drive-thru intercom activated. The little red light blinked on, stayed on for exactly 30 minutes. The manager fast-forwarded through it, but nothing else happened. No cars, no movement, nothing. Except, "There," she whispered, pointing at the screen. "Every night." She pulled up Monday's footage. Sundays, Saturdays, going back weeks. Every single night, at exactly midnight, the intercom turned on for precisely 30 minutes. And in the audio log, she showed me the system that recorded drive-thru orders. The same thing appeared. "More time. Please. More time." The same voice each night. Not distorted or strange on the recording, but familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. It sounded like me. Not similar to me. It was my voice, but wrong. Like hearing yourself on a recording but knowing you never said those words. The manager looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Fear? Pity? Understanding? It started about 3 months ago, she said quietly, right after we renovated. We had to dig up part of the parking lot, the part where the old drive-through used to be in the 80s. Found some things down there, old uniforms, a cash register from 1982, and she paused, seeming to weigh her words. Other things. Personal effects, a wallet, car keys, things that shouldn't have been buried under concrete. She pulled out a folder from the desk, thick with papers and photos. Police reports, she explained, though she wasn't supposed to have copies. The renovation had uncovered what might have been a crime scene from decades ago, but there wasn't enough evidence to investigate properly. No body, no definitive proof of anything, except that someone had carefully buried possessions beneath what would become the drive-through lane. The wallet, she said, sliding a photocopy across the desk, had a driver's license, expired 1987. I looked at the grainy copy of an old California license. The face was unclear, blown out by too much photocopying, but the name was perfectly legible. It was my name. Same spelling, middle initial and all. That's impossible, I heard myself say, though the words felt distant. I wasn't even born until 1992. The manager nodded slowly. I know, we looked that up. But here's the thing that really got to us. She pulled out another paper, a work schedule from 1987. He worked here, the night shift, every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. His last scheduled shift was September 22nd, 1987. He never showed up. No one ever saw him again. September 22nd. Last Tuesday had been September 22nd. I left the office feeling disconnected from my body, like I was floating slightly above and behind myself. The manager had offered to call someone for me, but I'd declined. What would I say? That someone with my name had disappeared 36 years ago? That I'd somehow received food from a closed restaurant? That my voice was asking for more time every night at midnight? The key was still in my wallet. I hadn't mentioned it to the manager, though I'm not sure why. It felt private, meant for me alone. As I walked to my car, I noticed something I'd missed before. There was an old door on the side of the building, painted over so many times it almost blended with the wall. It had been part of the original structure before the renovations and expansions. It had a lock that looked like it had been added recently, but underneath, I could see the outline of an older keyhole. I went back last night. I told myself I wouldn't, but at 11:45 p.m. I was pulling into the parking lot again. This time, I parked and walked to that side door. The brass key slid in perfectly, turning with a click that resonated in my chest. The door opened to a narrow hallway that shouldn't exist. The building wasn't big enough to contain it. The walls were that specific beige that everything was in the 80s, lit by buzzing fluorescents that made everything look slightly green. The hallway stretched impossibly far, and somewhere ahead, I could hear the sound of fryers, the beep of registers, the murmur of voices taking orders. I walked forward, each step taking me deeper into something that felt like memory. Not my memory, but memory itself, thick and viscous as old oil. The sounds grew louder, and I could smell that distinctive Jack-in-the-Box smell, but underneath it something else. That same metallic sweetness from the condensation. Old pennies, old blood, old time. The hallway opened into a restaurant, but not the one I'd just left. This was older, smaller, with wood paneling and orange vinyl booths. The menu board showed prices from 1987. The cash registers were the old mechanical kind. And behind the counter, someone was working the fryer, their back to me. They turned around slowly, and I saw my own face. Not similar, exact, but wearing a uniform from 1987, with a name tag that had my name and a little smiley face sticker next to it. My eyes were wrong, flat and dull like a fish's, but aware, so terribly aware. He smiled, and his mouth moved, but the voice came from everywhere, from the walls and the fryers and the fluorescent lights. You came back. You always come back. I ran, stumbled backward through the hallway that now felt longer, the walls closer, the lights flickering in patterns that spelled out words I didn't want to read. Behind me, I could hear footsteps matching mine perfectly, and that voice, my voice, saying over and over, "More time. Just need more time." I burst through the door into the night, gasping. The door slammed shut behind me, and when I turned back, it was gone. Not locked, not hidden, gone. Just smooth wall where it had been, layers of paint unbroken. My phone, which I'd made sure was fully charged, was dead. The time on my car's dashboard read 12:30 a.m. I'd been inside for exactly 30 minutes. I drove home in silence, but when I arrived, there was something on my doorstep. A white Jack in the box bag, perfectly folded at the top. Inside, 2 tacos, no lettuce. Large curly fries arranged in that perfect spiral. A medium Coke that was still impossibly cold. And another receipt. This one had no order number, just a message in that same neat handwriting. Tomorrow. Your shift starts at midnight. That was last night. It's afternoon now as I write this, and I've been trying to make sense of it. Trying to find some explanation that doesn't end with me accepting that I'm either losing my mind or caught in something I can't understand. The rational part of my brain keeps saying temporal loops don't exist, that whatever happened in 1987 has nothing to do with me, that this is all some elaborate hallucination brought on by stress or bad food or carbon monoxide poisoning. But the receipt is real. The key is real. And when I looked myself up online, really looked, I found something. A missing person report from 1987, just a brief mention in an archived newspaper. Same name as mine. Last seen at his job at Jack in the Box. His family said he'd been complaining about losing time, about hours disappearing, about feeling like he was being watched. They found his car in the parking lot, still running, driver door open. The receipt for his last purchase was on the passenger seat. Order number 0. It's 11 p.m. now. I'm sitting in my apartment, and I can feel it pulling at me. Not a voice or a command, but something deeper. Like gravity, but sideways, tugging at the spaces between my thoughts. I know what will happen if I go back. I'll walk through that door that shouldn't exist, down that hallway that can't be there, and I'll take my place behind the counter. I'll work the fryer. I'll take orders. I'll ask for more time, every night at midnight, hoping someone will hear me. Someone with my name, my face, my life. But 36 years from now, or ago, or both. The clock on my wall has stopped at 11:47. My phone is dead again, though it was charging. My car keys are in my hand, though I don't remember picking them up. I can smell French fries, old pennies. Time itself, oxidizing in the air around me. The receipt in my wallet has changed. I just looked at it. Order number 0 is gone. In its place, employee number 0. Start date, September 22nd, 1987. End date, blank. There's a knock at my door, 3 gentle taps. When I look through the peephole, no one is there, but I can see a Jack in the box bag on the mat. The bag is moving, breathing, waiting. I know I should throw the key away, board up my door, drive to another state. But I also know it won't matter. Time isn't a line, it's a loop, and loops have no beginning, no end, just the endless return to the same point. The same order, the same shift, the same 30 minutes that somehow contain 36 years. My hand is on the doorknob now. The metal is cold, colder than it should be. When I turn it, I can hear that sound again. Fryers bubbling, registers beeping, and underneath it all, my own voice from very far away or very long ago, asking for more time. Just a little more time. The door opens, and the hallway is there, stretching into my apartment where my living room should be. The fluorescent lights hum their sick green song. Somewhere at the end, I know, is a counter where I'm already standing, where I've always been standing, where I will stand forever, taking orders that come from nowhere, serving food that shouldn't exist, trapped in the 30 minutes between midnight and morning that repeat endlessly in a closed restaurant that's somehow always open. I step forward, and my apartment door closes behind me with the sound of a receipt printing. Order complete. Time, 12 a.m. Thank you for waiting. Story 6. The Nevada desert has a way of playing tricks on tired eyes. I've driven that stretch of Highway 95 more times than I can count, always after my night shifts at the distribution center, always with the same heavy exhaustion pulling at my eyelids. But what happened 3 weeks ago wasn't fatigue. I know the difference between tired hallucinations and something that leaves physical evidence behind. It was 3:47 a.m. when the blue lights first appeared in my rearview mirror. I remember the exact time because I just checked my phone at a red light 10 miles back, wondering if I should call in sick for tomorrow's shift. The lights came out of nowhere. No headlights approaching from behind, just sudden blue strobes cutting through the darkness like someone had flipped a switch. My first thought was speeding, but my cruise control was set to exactly 72 in a 75 zone. I always keep it there. The shoulder was wide enough, gravel crunching under my tires as I pulled over. The patrol car, if that's what it was, stopped about 20 feet behind me, those blue lights painting hypnotic patterns across my dashboard. I rolled down my window and waited, hands visible on the steering wheel like my father taught me. The desert air rushed in, carrying the scent of creosote and something else, something metallic that made my sinuses ache. Through my side mirror, I watched a figure emerge from the vehicle. The uniform looked right at first glance. Tan shirt, dark pants, the confident swagger of authority. But something was off about the way he moved. Too fluid, like his joints had extra pivot points. He approached my window but stopped about 3 feet away, just far enough that I had to lean out to see him properly. The badge on his chest caught the moonlight wrong. It should have reflected, should have gleamed, but it seemed to absorb light instead, creating a dark spot on his uniform. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," he said, but his hand wasn't moving toward his weapon. Instead, it hovered near my passenger side, fingers twitching toward my glove compartment like he was fighting an urge to reach through the window. That's when I noticed his face. In the alternating blue light, his features kept shifting, not dramatically, just enough that I couldn't quite focus on them, like looking at someone through water. "I'd prefer to stay in the vehicle, officer. Can I ask why you pulled me over?" He tilted his head at an angle that made my neck hurt just looking at it. His fingers were still dancing near my glove box, and I realized with a cold certainty that he wasn't wearing a body camera. No dashboard camera either. I could see his patrol car clearly in my mirror, and it was too clean, too generic, like a movie prop. "Sir, I need you to exit the vehicle now." His voice had an echo to it, as if two people were speaking in almost perfect unison. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but running from cops, real or otherwise, never ends well. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I rolled up my window while maintaining eye contact, locked my doors, and grabbed my phone. "I'm calling 911 to verify this stop," I said loudly enough for him to hear through the glass. The change was instantaneous. The thing pretending to be a cop jerked backward like I'd thrown acid at him. He stumbled toward his vehicle, moving in that wrong-jointed way, and the moment he reached his car, the blue lights died. Not turned off. Died, like someone had cut the power. The patrol car reversed into the darkness without headlights, tires squealing, and disappeared into the desert night like it had never existed. My hands shook as I actually dialed 911. The dispatcher sounded confused when I gave her my location. No units were assigned to that stretch of highway. No traffic stops had been called in. She kept me on the line while I drove the remaining 40 miles home, my eyes constantly checking the mirrors. I might have written it off as some elaborate robbery attempt, maybe someone with a decommissioned patrol car trying to catch travelers off guard. But 2 days later, I found the first piece of evidence that made my skin crawl. I was checking my oil when I noticed something under my rear bumper, strips of reflective tape, precisely placed where the toll cameras would capture them. They weren't random. Someone had mapped out the exact angles, the exact positions. I peeled them off with trembling fingers, and underneath each strip was a small symbol burned into the plastic. Symbols that hurt to look at directly. That's when the real surveillance began. Every commute became an exercise in paranoia. Black cars would appear in my mirrors, maintaining perfect distance, never close enough to see the drivers clearly. They seemed to know when I was about to slow down, matching my deceleration before I even touched the brake. When I'd speed up to test them, they'd maintain that exact distance, like we were connected by an invisible rope. I started taking different routes, leaving at different times. It didn't matter. They always found me somewhere along the way. Sometimes it was a black sedan, sometimes an SUV, once even a pickup truck that looked exactly like mine, except for the tinted windows that revealed nothing of who was inside. The messages started a week ago. Not texts or calls, those would leave traces. Instead, I'd find things. A parking ticket under my wiper that wasn't from any real agency, just coordinates and a time. A receipt in my mailbox for gas I never purchased, from a station that doesn't exist, time-stamped for 3:47 a.m. A photo slipped under my apartment door showing my car from above, taken from an impossible angle unless someone was floating 50 feet in the air. 3 of my co-workers have mentioned being pulled over on that same stretch of highway. They describe it differently. One said the officer was a woman who never blinked. Another said there were 2 officers who moved in perfect synchronization. But the details that matter are always the same. The non-reflective badge, the interest in their glove compartment, the way the patrol car vanishes into the darkness without lights. None of them found tape under their bumpers. That distinction terrifies me more than I can express. I've started keeping a journal, documenting everything. Times, dates, license plates when I can catch them. The patterns are emerging, but they don't make human sense. The cars appear at intervals that match no traffic pattern, no shift change, no logical explanation. They're tracking something, but I don't think it's me. I think I'm just the carrier for whatever they're actually monitoring. Last night, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled over at the exact spot where the first encounter happened, got out of my car, and waited. The desert was silent except for my breathing and the tick of my cooling engine. I stood there for an hour, waiting for them to show themselves, to finally reveal what they wanted. Nothing came. But when I got back in my car, there was something in my glove compartment that wasn't there before. A single photograph, old and yellowed at the edges, showing this exact stretch of highway from decades ago. In the distance, barely visible, was a convoy of black vehicles surrounding something covered in a tarp, something that required an 18-wheeler to transport. On the back, someone had written, "They never left. They're still watching for it to return." I drive a different route now, adding an extra hour to my commute. But sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, I hear the sound of engines idling outside my window. When I look, the street is empty, but the air shimmers like heat waves in the darkness. And I know they're there, waiting in some space adjacent to ours, watching through windows we can't see. My glove compartment lock broke last week. I've fixed it 3 times, but it keeps breaking, as if something needs it to remain accessible. I've stopped keeping anything in there, but every morning I find new things. Sand that's too fine to be from Earth, photographs of highways that don't match any maps, receipts for tolls on roads that don't exist. The rational part of my mind says I'm having a breakdown, that the stress of night shifts and isolation is manifesting as elaborate paranoid delusions. That's what my therapist suggested when I tried to explain it without sounding completely insane. But delusions don't leave physical evidence. Delusions don't show up in security footage from gas stations, always at the edge of the frame, always watching. I've been researching the history of that stretch of Highway 95. There are gaps, periods where the historical record just stops, where newspaper archives are missing, where satellite images show strange distortions. Something happened there, something that required watchers to remain, observers to document who passes through and what they might be carrying without knowing it. The thing is, I don't think they're entirely in our dimension. I think that's why the badge didn't reflect light properly, why their movements seem wrong, why their vehicles can vanish without a trace. They're bleeding through from somewhere else, somewhere where the rules are different, where watching and waiting have a purpose we can't comprehend. Sometimes I wonder if that first encounter was a test, if rolling up my window and calling 911 marked me as something special, something worth monitoring more closely. Or maybe it marked me as dangerous, a potential vector for whatever they're trying to prevent from returning. The tape under my bumper wasn't for cameras. I understand that now. It was for them, markers that make me visible in whatever space they inhabit. I'm tagged like wildlife, tracked across dimensions I can't perceive, but can feel pressing against the edges of reality. My latest theory, the one that keeps me awake at night, is that we're the ones who aren't fully real. That stretch of highway is a boundary, a place where our world overlaps with theirs, and they're the ones trying to keep us from bleeding through into their reality. The glove compartment isn't a target. It's a checkpoint, a place where they verify we're not carrying something that doesn't belong in either world. But theories are just comfort food for fear. The truth is, I don't know what they want, what they're watching for, or what happens to the people who don't pass their test. All I know is that every night when I drive home, even on my new route, I feel them out there in the darkness, waiting for something to arrive or escape, using those of us who travel these roads as unwitting sensors in a surveillance network that spans dimensions. The photograph in my glove compartment has changed. The convoy is closer now, the tarp slightly lifted, revealing a glimpse of something that makes my eyes water to perceive. Each night it changes a little more, like it's showing me a slow-motion film of something approaching through time itself. I've stopped trying to avoid them. There's no point. Whatever marked me that night on Highway 95 is permanent, a beacon that transcends the physical. So I drive and they watch, and we maintain this strange detente where neither side acknowledges what's really happening. But sometimes, in that drowsy space between waking and sleeping, I understand. We're not being watched. We're the watchers, infected with something that makes us observe our own reality from outside it, reporting back to something that needs to know when the barriers weaken. That's why they were interested in my glove compartment. They weren't trying to take something. They were trying to leave something behind. And now it's part of me. This watching. This waiting. Every black car could be them, or could be others like me, carrying the same infection of observation, the same compulsion to document the boundaries wearing thin. We're a network of unwilling sentries, guarding against or perhaps guiding something that moves between worlds like smoke between fingers. The highway stretches on, and we drive, and we watch, and we wait for whatever comes next, knowing that when it arrives, we'll be the first to see it. Or maybe we already have and just can't remember. The tape is back under my bumper. I didn't put it there. This time I'm leaving it. Story 7. And the first time I saw the orange flashes reflected in the windows, I was unpacking boxes in what would become my study. It was a Tuesday night in late November, snow falling thick and silent outside my new home in rural Vermont. The glow pulsed 3 times against the frosted glass. Bright, deliberate, wrong. When I rushed to look outside, the yard lay pristine and dark, untouched snow glowing faintly blue under starlight. I'd bought the house for its isolation. After 15 years of city life, of constant noise and surveillance cameras and neighbors who knew too much about everyone's business, I craved the kind of solitude only these old Vermont hills could provide. The realtor had been eager, too eager perhaps, to close the deal. The price was reasonable for a property this size, though she'd mentioned something vague about quirks that came with older homes. The house sat on 12 acres of pine forest, built in 1892 by a lumber baron who'd gone mysteriously bankrupt 3 years after moving in. Since then, it had changed hands 7 times. The longest anyone had stayed was 11 years, the shortest 4 months. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to know. I just wanted quiet. But quiet, I would learn, is relative. The discovery in the closet came 3 weeks later. I was installing shelves in the master bedroom when I noticed writing on the wooden backing, faded but deliberate. Don't cook after 11 p.m. Trust me. RM 1987. Below it, in different handwriting, he's right. JL 1994. And below that, fresher ink, the house knows, 2003. I laughed it off. Small town superstitions. Maybe some previous owners had issues with old wiring that couldn't handle the electrical load at night. I was planning to update everything anyway. That night, curiosity got the better of me. At 11:15 p.m., I went to the kitchen and turned the knob on the gas stove. Nothing. Not even the clicking of the igniter. I checked the pilot light, burning steady and blue. Tried another burner. Dead. The The digital display on the oven read 11:15, but when I glanced at the antique wall clock the previous owners had left behind, its hands were frozen at 10:59. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the November cold seeping through the old windows. I spent the next hour testing every appliance in the kitchen. The microwave worked fine. The coffee maker, the toaster, all functional. But anything involving flame or significant heat simply refused. At midnight exactly, the stove clicked back to life on its own. The burner I'd left turned on suddenly blazing high. I jumped back, heart hammering, and quickly shut it off. The next day, I replaced the wall clock with a digital one from the hardware store in town. The old man who rang me up, weather-beaten face marked by decades of Vermont winters, studied me for a long moment. "You bought the Haraway place," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. He handed me my change, then leaned forward slightly. "That house has been standing for over a century. Not many can say that around here. Fire, flood, the hurricane of '38, nothing's touched it." He paused. "Maybe there's a reason for that." That night, I deliberately stayed up until 11 p.m. The new digital clock glowed reassuringly on the kitchen wall. 10:58, 10:59, 11 o'clock. Nothing happened. I felt foolish for holding my breath. Then I noticed the outlets. All of them. Every single electrical outlet in the kitchen were sparking. Tiny orange flashes like miniature fireworks, but contained, controlled. The lights didn't flicker, no circuits tripped, just those persistent rhythmic sparks that lasted exactly 1 minute before stopping. I called an electrician the next morning. He arrived in the afternoon, a younger man named Dave, who whistled while he worked. He spent 3 hours checking every wire, every connection, every amp of current flowing through the house. "Everything's perfect," he said, packing up his tools. "Better than perfect, actually. This wiring, it's like it's been maintained from the inside out. Self-correcting almost." He paused at the door, voice dropping low. "My grandfather worked on this house once, back in the '60s. Told me something I never forgot. He said this house learned what keeps it safe. Said it remembers every close call, every almost disaster, and it adapts." "That's ridiculous," I said, but my voice came out thinner than intended. Dave shrugged. "Maybe. But my grandfather also said the family that lived here in '64 ignored the warnings, tried to deep fry a turkey at 11:30 p.m. one Thanksgiving. The house let them. They found the family on the lawn the next morning, all their belongings arranged neatly on the grass, front door locked from the inside. They never could explain how they got out there. Moved away the next week. After Dave left, I found myself developing new habits. When the lights flickered at me, always a specific pattern, like Morse code I couldn't quite decode, I would turn everything off. The stove, the space heaters, even my laptop. I'd sit in darkness, listening to the house settle around me, wondering if those creaking sounds were wood contracting in the cold or something else entirely. The house began to train me in other ways too. The shower would scald if I tried to use it during thunderstorms, no matter how I adjusted the temperature. Windows would stick shut when the wind rose above a certain speed. The basement door would lock itself whenever the sump pump activated, keeping me away from potential flooding. At first, I resisted. I'd force windows open, jimmy locks, ignore the warning flickers. But each time I did, something would happen. Not to me, never to me, but close enough to make me understand. A tree would fall exactly where I'd been standing minutes before. The space heater I'd insisted on using would be found in the morning, its cord melted into a puddle of plastic, but somehow having never ignited. The basement would flood to exactly 1 inch below the electrical box, no more, no less. The house was protecting itself, and by extension, me. But protection and imprisonment can look remarkably similar from the inside. My neighbor Bill lived a quarter-mile down the road. He'd stop by occasionally, always during daylight hours, to check on me. He was the kind of Vermont native who prided himself on rationality, on not buying into what he called old woman tales. When I mentioned the house's peculiarities, he laughed. "Houses don't learn," he said, sipping coffee in my kitchen one afternoon. "You're letting isolation get to you. Come by my place tonight, we'll have a beer, watch the game." "What time?" I asked. "Game starts at 11, come by around then." Something cold settled in my stomach. "I'll try," I said. That night, at 10:45, I got ready to leave. But my car wouldn't start. Not dead, the engine turned over fine. It just wouldn't catch. I tried for 15 minutes before giving up. The moment the clock hit 11:01, the engine roared to life. I drove to Bill's house, found it dark. His car was in the driveway, but he didn't answer the door. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. The next morning I learned he'd been found wandering his backyard in his underwear, muttering about orange lights and being unable to find his own front door. He'd been outside for 3 hours in near freezing temperatures, but somehow hadn't suffered any frostbite. He couldn't explain what had happened. He moved in with his daughter in Burlington 2 weeks later. Before he left, he stopped by one final time. His face was gaunt, eyes shadowed. "Your house," he said quietly. "I didn't believe you." But that night, I saw them. The orange flashes. They were in my house, coming from your direction. Like they were searching for something, or warning about something. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't fight it. Whatever that house wants, just don't fight it." Winter deepened. Snow piled up to the first-floor windows. The nearest neighbor after Bill was now 3 miles away. I found myself talking to the house, not expecting answers but offering a running commentary on my day. The flickers became a language I was slowly learning to interpret. 3 quick pulses meant the heating oil was low. A sustained glow meant a storm was coming. A single bright flash meant stop whatever I was doing immediately. I obeyed. What choice did I have? In January, during a particularly severe cold snap, I woke to find messages scrawled in the frost on my bedroom window. Not words. Patterns, symbols that hurt to look at directly. They appeared every night for a week, always different, always incomprehensible. I tried photographing them, but my phone would shut off the moment I aimed it at the glass. I tried sketching them, but my hand would cramp, the pencil lead would break, the paper would tear. The house didn't want me to record them, so I stopped trying. Research became my escape. I spent days in the town library, combing through old newspapers and property records. I found traces, never proof, but traces. The lumber baron who built the house had been experimenting with something he called architectural consciousness, believing that buildings could be designed to have a primitive awareness. His bankruptcy had come after he'd invested everything in bizarre construction techniques and materials that no one else understood. There were other stories, too. A family in 1934 who claimed the house had actually walked, 100 feet back from a river during a flood. A photographer in 1971 who swore he'd captured the house appearing in 2 places at once in a double exposure that couldn't be explained. A child in 1989 who drew picture after picture of orange angels living in the walls, protecting everyone inside. Each story was dismissed, rationalized, forgotten, but taken together, they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. The breaking point came in February. I'd been living in the house for 3 months, perfectly safe but increasingly isolated. The nearest town was a 20-minute drive in good weather, twice that in snow. I worked remotely, ordered groceries online, existed in a bubble of protective isolation that the house seemed to encourage. Then she appeared. I first saw her reflection in the kitchen window at 10:58 p.m., a woman standing in my living room. I spun around. No one there. But in the reflection, she remained, dressed in a high-collared dress from another century, watching me with eyes that held terrible knowledge. Night after night she appeared, always in reflections, always at 10:58. She never spoke, never moved, just watched with an expression of profound sadness. I began to think I was losing my mind. That isolation and the house's strangeness had finally pushed me over the edge. Then I found her photograph in the town archives, Margaret Haraway, the lumber baron's wife. She died in the house in 1895, 3 years after it was built. The cause of death was listed as nervous exhaustion, but a diary entry from the town doctor suggested something else. She claimed the house wouldn't let her leave. Nonsense, of course, but she believed it absolutely. Found her in the kitchen, staring at the wall clock, waiting for something she couldn't name. That night, Margaret appeared clearer than ever in the window's reflection. This time, her lips moved. No sound, but I could read the words. It learns. It remembers. It protects. But it hungers, too. Hungers for what? I asked the empty room. The lights flickered in a pattern I'd never seen before. Urgent, almost frantic. Then, for the first time since I'd moved in, every clock in the house showed a different time. The digital clock read 11:47. The microwave showed 3:15. My phone claimed it was 6:23 a.m., but the antique wall clock I'd rehung out of curiosity still showed 10:59. Margaret's reflection pointed at the antique clock, then at me, then at herself. The message was clear. We were all frozen at 10:59. All of us who'd lived in this house. All of us who'd learned its rules. We existed in that eternal minute before danger, forever prevented from moving forward into disaster, but also unable to move back to freedom. I understood then what the house had learned, what it remembered, what it hungered for. Occupants. Not to harm, but to preserve, to collect, to protect so thoroughly that leaving became impossible. Every owner who'd fled had been allowed to go only because they'd refused to learn the language of flickers and frost, had ignored the warnings and wisdom the house tried to share. But I had learned. I had listened. I had obeyed. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange calm. I walked to the kitchen window where Margaret waited in reflection. "How long?" I asked. She held up her hand, fingers spread. 5 owners, 5 decades, 5 centuries. The ambiguity felt intentional. Now it's March. The snow is melting, revealing a yard I barely remember. The house and I have reached an understanding. I don't cook after 11 p.m. I turn off everything when the lights flicker. I don't fight the locked doors or stuck windows. In return, I am absolutely safe. Nothing can touch me here. No disaster, no tragedy, no ending. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still entirely human, or if I'm becoming something else. Another guardian, another memory the house will carry forward. My reflection has started to look strange, older and younger simultaneously, as if I exist across multiple times at once. The realtor called yesterday, just checking in. Her voice sounded distant, like she was calling from another world. She asked if I was happy with the house. "It's perfect," I heard myself say. "I can't imagine ever leaving." She paused, then said something that chilled me more than any ghostly appearance. "That's what they all say at first. Then either they run, or, well, no one's quite sure what happens to the ones who don't run. Their names just fade from records, like they never existed outside those walls." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I was fine, that I was still myself. But when I looked in the mirror after hanging up, I saw Margaret standing behind me. Not in reflection this time, actually there. She looked solid, real, present. She reached out and touched my shoulder, and I felt it, warm and reassuring. "The house needs witnesses," she said, her voice like wind through old wood. "To remember what it prevents. To testify to its purpose. We are not prisoners. We are archives." I turned to face her directly, but she was gone. Only the lingering warmth on my shoulder proved she'd been there at all. Tonight, I'm writing this account on my laptop. It's 10:45 p.m. In 14 minutes, the house will begin its nightly ritual of protection, and I will obey its signals. I've stopped questioning whether the dangers are real, or if the house creates them to justify its existence. The distinction no longer matters. What matters is that I am safe, preserved, part of something larger than myself. The couple who lived here in 2003 left a note I found yesterday, hidden under loose floorboards in the attic. The house doesn't just learn from disaster, it learns from us. Our fears become its warnings. Our accidents become its prohibitions. We teach it how to keep us safe, and it teaches us how to never leave. I should be terrified. I should pack everything and run before 10:59, before the house begins its evening surveillance, before Margaret appears with her knowing smile. But I won't, because somewhere deep in my bones, I understand a truth that fights against every rational thought. The house isn't keeping me here. I'm choosing to stay. Because outside these walls, disaster is random, meaningless, unavoidable. Inside, every danger has a warning, every threat has a pattern, every risk can be predicted and prevented. The clock shows 10:58. The lights are beginning to flicker. Margaret is forming in the window's reflection, no longer alone. There are others with her, a man in a 1940s suit, a woman in 1970s bell-bottoms, a teenager in a Letterman jacket dated 1988. All the ones who stayed, all the ones who learned, all the ones who chose safety over freedom. 10:59. The clocks stop. They always stop, and in that eternal minute, we are all here, all safe, all part of the house's growing consciousness. We are its memory, its purpose, its hunger satisfied. I close my laptop. The lights flicker their final warning. I turn everything off and sit in the darkness, listening to the house breathe around me, through me, as me. Tomorrow, someone might drive by and see this place, think about buying it, drawn by the isolation and the reasonable price. The realtor will mention quirks. They'll laugh it off. And the house will wait, patient and hungry, ready to teach another soul the terrible comfort of perfect safety, the seductive prison of being forever protected from a danger that might not exist beyond these walls, or might be the only thing that does. In the darkness, I hear Margaret whisper. Or maybe it's the wind. Or maybe it's my own voice echoing back from some future where I am the reflection warning the next occupant. The house learns. It remembers. It protects. And we, I whisper back to the darkness, we become what it remembers. The orange flashes begin their nightly dance across the windows, and I watch them with the detached fascination of someone who has crossed a line they can no longer see. Outside, the world continues its dangerous spin. Inside, we are frozen at 10:59, forever safe, forever trapped, forever part of something that might be saving us, or might be slowly digesting us into itself. I no longer know which. I no longer care. The house flickers its approval, and I smile in the darkness, home at last. Story 8. The cold has a particular quality in Minnesota winters. It doesn't just chill, it invades. It seeps through window frames and crawls beneath doors, finding every microscopic gap in your defenses. That February night at 2:47 a.m., the cold wasn't what woke me. It was two soft knocks on my front door, so gentle they might have been mistaken for settling wood, if not for their deliberate rhythm. I lay in bed, listening to my own breathing, waiting for the sound to repeat. The furnace hummed its mechanical lullaby. Ice crystals formed geometric patterns on my bedroom window. Then, nothing. Just as I began to convince myself I'd imagined it, the knocks came again. 2 measured taps, patient and unhurried. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor from 3 houses down standing in slippers and a bathrobe, his breath forming small clouds in the porch light. We'd exchanged perhaps a dozen words in the 2 years since I'd moved in. His name escaped me. Something with a D. His face looked different in the yellow light, older somehow, with shadows pooling in the hollows beneath his eyes. When I opened the door, the cold rushed in like an eager visitor. He didn't apologize for the hour or explain his presence. He simply stood there, snow gathering on his shoulders, and said those words that would haunt me. If you want to say goodbye, now's the time. The statement hung between us, crystallizing in the frigid air. My mind raced through a catalog of loved ones. My mother in Phoenix, healthy as ever. My brother in Seattle, who texted me a meme just hours ago. My ex-wife in Chicago, though we hadn't spoken in months. Nobody was sick. Nobody was dying. He repeated the phrase, identical in tone and cadence, as if playing a recording. His eyes never quite met mine, focusing instead on something just past my left shoulder. I found myself turning to look, but there was only the familiar hallway, the coat rack, the mirror reflecting us both in its darkened surface. The conversation, if you could call it that, lasted less than a minute. He wouldn't elaborate, wouldn't explain. When I pressed him for details, he simply turned and walked back through the snow, leaving a trail of footprints that seemed too deep for such a slight man. I watched him disappear into the darkness between streetlights, never once looking back. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat in my kitchen, nursing black coffee and staring at my phone, that modern oracle we consult in times of uncertainty. The rational part of my brain offered explanations, dementia, sleepwalking, a prank, but something in his delivery, that mechanical precision, suggested intention. At 3:17 a.m., I gave in to the compulsion. I scrolled through my contacts until I found his number. My old mentor from graduate school, the man who'd guided me through my dissertation, who'd recommended me for my first real job, who'd become something between a father figure and a friend. We hadn't spoken in maybe 6 months, our relationship sustained by occasional emails and holiday cards. The phone rang once, a single elongated tone that seemed to stretch beyond its natural duration. Then silence. Not the silence of a dropped call or a deadline, but an active, listening silence. I could hear something, barely perceptible, like breathing through fabric. Then the call disconnected, and my phone immediately chimed with a voicemail notification. The message was 17 seconds long. For the first 16 seconds, there was only a low, sustained hum, like electrical interference or distant machinery. But beneath it, growing clearer as I pressed the phone harder against my ear, was the sound of breathing. Not quite human, not quite mechanical. And then, at the very end, clear as a bell, a third knock, not 2, like at my door. 3. The recording ended. I called back immediately. This time the phone rang normally, 4 times before going to his voicemail. His familiar voice, asking me to leave a message. I hung up and tried again. Same result. On the 3rd attempt, I left a rambling message about the neighbor, the strange visit, asking him to call me back as soon as possible. He never did. The next morning, I walked to the neighbor's house. The doorbell echoed inside, unanswered. Through the front window, I could see a normal living room, beige furniture, a television, family photos on the mantel. When I asked the woman next door about him, she gave me a puzzled look. He'd left for Florida 3 days ago, she said. Annual trip to escape the winter. She'd been collecting his mail. I showed her the footprints, still visible in the snow despite the light dusting overnight. She studied them with the careful attention of someone humoring a concerning stranger, then pointed out that they could have been anyone's. The mailman, perhaps. A delivery person. When I insisted they led directly to his house, she suggested I might be stressed, that the winter sometimes played tricks on people who weren't used to the isolation. But I knew what I'd seen. His face in my porch light, the particular shuffle of his slippers on my doorstep, the weight of his presence in the cold. My mentor never returned my calls. When I reached out to his department, they informed me he was on sabbatical, unreachable. His email bounced back. His social media had gone dark. Not deleted, just dormant, frozen at a post from 3 weeks prior about a conference he was attending. Then the notifications began. Every night at 3:17 a.m., without fail, my phone would chime twice. Not a call, not a message, just the notification sound, doubled, as if 2 phones were receiving the same alert simultaneously. I'd check, and there would be nothing. No missed calls, no new messages, no app updates. Just that paired sound, perfectly synchronized, like an echo that arrived at the same time as the original. I changed my notification settings, muted my phone, even turned it off completely. The chimes continued, somehow emanating from the powered-down device. I moved it to another room, buried it in a drawer, wrapped it in towels. Distance and barriers meant nothing. At 3:17 a.m., those twin notes would sound, clear and insistent. 3 weeks into this pattern, I began to notice other duplications. My coffee maker would brew 2 cups when I'd only programmed 1. Emails would appear twice in my inbox, identical down to the timestamp. When I spoke on the phone, I'd occasionally hear my own voice echoed back, not delayed like feedback, but simultaneous, as if someone else was speaking my words in perfect unison. The neighbor returned from Florida, or so the woman next door claimed. I saw him once from a distance retrieving his mail. When I approached, he looked through me as if I were transparent, then went inside without acknowledgement. Later, when I knocked on his door, 2 careful taps, just as he'd done. There was no answer, though I could see his shadow moving behind the curtains. I began keeping a journal, documenting every instance of duplication, every anomaly. The entries themselves started to worry me. My handwriting would shift mid-sentence, becoming a perfect mirror of itself. Not backwards, but doubled, as if 2 hands were holding the same pen. Some mornings I'd find entries I didn't remember writing in my exact hand, describing dreams I couldn't recall having. The dreams, if they were dreams, always featured the same scene. A room I didn't recognize with 2 of everything. 2 chairs, 2 lamps, 2 windows showing the same view. And in the center, a phone ringing with that single, extended tone. In the dream, I'd answer it and hear my mentor's voice, but also my own, speaking in perfect synchronization. They'd say something urgent, something vital, but I could never remember the words upon waking, only that final sound, a third knock, like a period at the end of a sentence. I tried to research the phenomenon, searching for similar experiences, psychological explanations, anything that might provide context. But my searches would duplicate themselves, opening 2 browser windows simultaneously. Search results would appear twice, with subtle differences. A word changed here, a date altered there. I'd bookmark a page only to find 2 versions saved. Their URLs identical, but their content slightly shifted, as if I were seeing 2 parallel versions of the same information. My work began to suffer. Conference calls were unbearable. I'd hear every participant twice, their voices layered and slightly out of phase. Documents would replicate on my desktop. Emails would send themselves twice, causing confusion among colleagues. My supervisor suggested I take some time off, her concern evident in the careful way she avoided direct eye contact, the same way the neighbor had looked past me that night. I began to wonder if I was fragmenting, splitting into parallel versions of myself. The rational explanation was stress, isolation, perhaps a neurological issue. I scheduled a doctor's appointment, but the confirmation email arrived twice, for the same time, with 2 different confirmation numbers. When I called to clarify, the receptionist insisted they only had 1 appointment on file, though she sounded uncertain, her voice wavering as if she were reading 2 screens simultaneously. The grocery store became a maze of doubles. Products would appear twice on shelves, identical but occupying the same space. The checkout clerk would scan items that registered twice on the receipt, though I'd only placed them once on the belt. Other shoppers moved through the aisles in pairs, perfect duplicates walking in synchronization, their carts containing identical items. Or perhaps I was seeing everyone twice. Perhaps the doubling wasn't in the world, but in my perception. This thought was more terrifying than any supernatural explanation. If my mind was creating duplicates, how could I trust anything I experienced? How could I know which version was real? I started testing reality with small experiments. I'd place a single coin on the table and count it every hour. Sometimes there was 1, sometimes 2. Sometimes the second coin would be there only in my peripheral vision, disappearing when I looked directly at it. I'd record myself speaking, then play it back, hearing my voice doubled even in the recording, though others claimed to hear only 1 voice when I played it for them. The isolation grew unbearable. Friends stopped returning calls after receiving duplicate messages, each slightly different, creating confusion and concern. My brother flew out from Seattle after receiving 2 voicemails, one saying I was fine, one saying I needed help, both recorded at the exact same time. When he arrived, I could see 2 of him whenever he moved, a slight lag between versions like a persistence of vision. He stayed for 3 days, during which the duplications intensified. He'd pour 1 cup of coffee and find 2. His phone would ring with calls from numbers that didn't exist, playing recordings of conversations he'd had hours earlier. On the second night at 3:17 a.m., we both heard the notification chimes, not just from my phone but from his as well, though he swore he'd left it on silent. On his last morning as he packed to leave, he pulled me aside. His face was drawn, exhausted. He said he'd seen me in two places at once the previous night, in the kitchen getting water, and simultaneously in the living room, staring out the window. Both versions had responded when he'd called my name. Both had turned to look at him with the same expression of confusion. After he left, I found a note in his handwriting, though he claimed not to have written it. It simply said, "The third knock opens the door between." Between what? Between realities? Between versions of ourselves? Between sanity and madness? I thought about calling my old mentor again, but I knew now that he wouldn't answer, or perhaps he would, and that was what I feared. That I'd hear his voice doubled with my own, that we'd speak the same words, that I'd understand finally what the neighbor had meant that night. If you want to say goodbye, now's the time. Not goodbye to someone else. Goodbye to the singular self, to the illusion of one consciousness in one body, in one reality. The duplications were accelerating. I'd wake up and find two sets of clothes laid out, both worn, both carrying my scent. Mirrors showed my reflection twice, overlapping but not quite aligned. When I tried to write, two pens would move across the page, creating doubled words that somehow remained readable, as if the eye could process both versions simultaneously. Last week, I saw myself walking past my house. Not a glimpse or a trick of light, but a clear view of myself, wearing clothes I owned, walking with my particular gait. I ran outside, but the street was empty except for the familiar footprints in the snow. Two sets, parallel, as if I'd walked the path twice at the exact same moment. The neighbor appeared at my door again last night. The same two knocks, the same patient waiting. When I opened it, he stood in the same slippers, the same bathrobe, snow gathering on his shoulders, in the exact same pattern. But this time, I could see through him slightly, as if he were made of frosted glass. Behind him, visible through his translucent form, stood another figure. It was him again, solid this time, but looking past me into my house with an expression of recognition. He spoke, and both versions moved their lips, but the words came from somewhere else entirely, somewhere between them. "You're almost ready to answer." I wanted to ask what he meant, but I found myself speaking in unison with a voice that wasn't quite my own. "The third knock is mine to make." They nodded, both of them, or all of them, as I was beginning to see more shapes behind them, an infinite regression of neighbors stretching back into the snowy night. Then they turned and walked away, their footprints multiplying in the snow until the entire street was covered in overlapping tracks, all leading to and from my door. Tonight, I sit here writing this, watching the clock approach 3:17 a.m. My phone sits on the table, dark and waiting. But I know the notification will come, doubled, as always. And I know now what I have to do. The third knock isn't something you hear. It's something you make. It's the sound of choosing to step through, to acknowledge the multiplication, to accept that we are not singular beings in singular bodies, but something more complex, more layered, more frightening. My mentor knew. That's why he answered after one ring, why his voicemail contained that final knock. He'd already made his choice, already stepped through. The breathing in the recording wasn't his, it was mine, from this moment, reaching back through time, through parallel possibilities, to answer my own call. The neighbor wasn't at my door that night to deliver a message. He was there to show me what I was becoming, what we all are beneath the illusion of singularity. Every duplication, every doubled notification, every mirrored moment. They're not symptoms of madness, but glimpses of truth. It's 3:16 a.m. now. In 1 minute, the chimes will sound. But tonight, I won't wait for them. Tonight, I'll pick up the phone first. I'll dial my own number. And when I answer, when both versions of me answer, I'll deliver the third knock that opens the door between. I can already hear myself breathing on the other end of the line that hasn't been dialed yet. I can feel my hand reaching for the phone from two directions at once. The division isn't beginning, it's ending. Or perhaps ending and beginning are just two words for the same moment, experienced simultaneously. The clock turns. 3:17 a.m. I reach for the phone and my hand meets another hand, my own, reaching from the other side. We answer together. Story 9. The studio was never supposed to be mine. I inherited it from my predecessor at the firm, a senior architect who'd taken an abrupt medical leave 3 months into my tenure. Nobody talked about why. The space came with his mahogany drafting table, a leather chair that creaked with age, and windows that faced the perpetual gray of Seattle's skyline. What it didn't come with was an explanation for the worn groove in the floorboards behind the chair, as if someone had stood there for years, shifting their weight from foot to foot. That Tuesday afternoon, exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. The deadline for the Belltown project loomed, and I'd been pulling 18-hour days. The rain drummed against the windows in its familiar Seattle rhythm, and the radiator clicked its metallic lullaby. I told myself I'd rest my eyes for just 5 minutes. The dream came immediately, if it was a dream. I was still in the studio, but the light was wrong. Everything appeared stretched, as if viewed through old glass. Someone stood behind my chair. I couldn't see them, but I felt their presence the way you feel electricity before lightning strikes. They were leaning over my shoulder, studying my work. Their breath didn't fog the air, but I sensed it anyway. Cold, patient, waiting. I jerked awake at 2:41. The sensation of presence remained, pressing against the back of my neck like fingers about to touch but never quite making contact. The air felt dense, occupied. I spun around so fast the chair nearly toppled. Nothing. Just the familiar studio walls, the rain-streaked windows, my reflection staring back at me, pale and startled. But the space behind my chair seemed darker than it should be, as if shadows had weight there. My phone buzzed. A text from my colleague. Had to move our 2:30. Someone was already in the conference room. I stared at the message. Our meeting was supposed to be at 2:30. I dozed off around 2:15. The timestamp on his message read 2:47. My fingers trembled as I typed back, "Who was in the room?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, some older guy, just standing there, looking at your usual seat. Gave me the creeps. Didn't say anything when I asked if he needed help. When I came back with security, room was empty. The studio suddenly felt too small. I grabbed my laptop and headed home, but not before noting something that made my skin crawl. The leather of my chair was cold, except for 2 distinct spots on the armrests, warm as if hands had just lifted away. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My apartment, usually a sanctuary from the office, felt permeable, invaded. I kept checking behind me, expecting to see someone standing in that patient, waiting posture. Sleep came in fragments, each time broken by the certainty that someone was leaning over my bed, studying me. The next morning, I went straight to the security office. The guard, a perpetually cheerful man named Dennis, pulled up the footage without question. We watched together as my colleague approached the conference room at 2:29, paused, then backed away. Through the glass door, we could see him gesturing at someone inside. "There," I pointed at the screen. "Who's that?" Dennis squinted. "I don't see anyone." I leaned closer. My colleague was clearly talking to someone, his body language defensive, confused. But the chair, my usual chair, appeared empty on the screen. "The footage gets weird here," Dennis said, forwarding to 2:41. The timestamp jumped directly to 2:44. "System glitch. Happens sometimes with the old cameras." But it wasn't just the conference room footage. When we checked the hallway cameras, the same gap appeared. 3 minutes missing, precisely when I'd awakened in my studio. I returned to work, trying to convince myself that exhaustion was playing tricks on my mind. But throughout the day, I caught glimpses, reflections in my computer screen showing someone standing behind me, shadows that didn't match the furniture, the sensation of breath on my neck when the windows were closed and the air was still. My productivity plummeted. Every time I tried to focus on the Belltown blueprints, my attention would drift to that spot behind my chair. I started working standing up, then moved my desk to face the wall, eliminating any space behind me. It didn't help. The presence simply adjusted, and I'd feel it beside me instead, just outside my peripheral vision. By Thursday, I was unraveling. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch. Coffee couldn't cut through the fog of exhaustion. When I arrived at the studio that morning, I found my chair turned around facing the window. The leather was warm, not just the armrest this time, but the entire back and seat, radiating heat like a living body had just vacated it. I should have left then. Should have requested a different office, taken sick leave, anything. But something kept me there, perhaps the same force that kept my predecessor away. Instead, I did something desperate. I set up my phone to record the studio while I worked. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then, reviewing the footage during lunch, I saw it. At 11:41, always 41 minutes past the hour, I was beginning to notice. The lighting in the room shifted subtly. The shadows deepened behind my chair. And though I was clearly visible at my desk, working, there was a moment where my reflection in the window showed two figures, me at my desk, and someone else, standing in that familiar spot, leaning forward slightly, watching my work. I confronted my coworkers, asking if anyone knew about my predecessor's departure. Most claimed ignorance, but one junior designer pulled me aside after a meeting. He started saying someone was in his office, she whispered, glancing around nervously. Someone who'd stand behind him, watching him work. He tried to ignore it at first, but it got worse. Started finding his work changed. Tiny alterations to his designs, measurements shifted by fractions of inches. Management thought he was having a breakdown. What happened to him? She hesitated. He's at Harborview, psychiatric ward. He insists someone else is using his body, making him do things. They say he has episodes where he stands perfectly still for hours, like he's waiting for something. That afternoon, I tried to work from home, but the presence followed. It wasn't bound to the studio, it was bound to me, or perhaps I was bound to it. I could feel it intensifying, growing more solid, more real. When I looked in the mirror, my reflection sometimes lagged a fraction of a second behind my movements. I researched the building's history obsessively. The architecture firm had been there for 15 years, but before that, the space housed a psychiatric practice. Before that, in the 1960s, it was a photography studio. The records grew sparse further back, but I found one newspaper clipping from 1932 about a tenant who'd disappeared, leaving behind only a room full of mirrors arranged in precise patterns. The article mentioned that visitors reported seeing reflections that didn't match reality, extra figures, reversed movements, shadows with no sources. By Saturday, I couldn't distinguish waking from sleeping. The presence was constant now, a weight that pressed against my consciousness. I'd catch myself standing in places I didn't remember going to, always at 41 minutes past the hour. My notebook filled with designs I didn't remember drawing, variations on my work, but with subtle wrongness to them, as if someone was trying to communicate through architecture. I decided to confront it directly. That night, I returned to the studio at 2 a.m. The building was empty, the security guard asleep at his desk. I sat in my chair and waited. At 2:41, the air thickened. This time, I didn't turn around. Instead, I spoke to the reflection in the window. "What do you want?" The reflection didn't answer, couldn't answer, but I understood anyway. It wasn't that something was haunting the studio. The studio itself was a kind of trap, a bubble in reality where time folded in on itself. Everyone who'd worked there long enough became part of it, layered on top of each other like double exposures in old photographs. My predecessor wasn't crazy. He was simply experiencing all the moments simultaneously. His present, my present, the presence of everyone who'd sat in that chair. We were all there, all the time, watching each other work, existing in the same space but different moments. our consciousness bleeding through the thin walls between minutes. I understood why the timestamp always showed 41. 4 and 1. For one. Forever one. But multiple. Occupying the same space, the same chair, the same moment stretched across years. The warmth I'd felt in the chair wasn't from someone who'd just left. It was from someone who was still there, would always be there. Me, in another layer of time. My predecessor, others before him. All of us occupants of the same impossible space. I tried to leave Seattle, but geography didn't matter anymore. The studio wasn't a place. It was a state of being. I carry it with me now, that sensation of someone standing behind me, watching my work. Sometimes I catch myself standing perfectly still, and I know that in another layer of time, I'm the one standing behind the chair, watching another version of myself work, trapped in an endless loop of observation and creation. The Belltown project was never completed. How could it be? Every line I draw exists in multiple versions, each iteration slightly different, created by all the hands that have held the pencil, will hold the pencil, are holding it now. We're all here, all the time, occupants of the same moment, stretched thin across the years like shadows cast by multiple lights. I've stopped fighting it. Resistance only makes the sensation stronger, the presence more insistent. Instead, I've learned to work with it, to feel the other hands guiding mine, the other eyes reading over my shoulder. We're collaborators now, all us occupants, creating designs that exist between moments, architecture for spaces that shouldn't exist but do. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if this is what madness feels like. This gentle dissolution of boundaries between self and other, between now and then. But the work continues, must continue. There's always someone watching, waiting, creating. We're never alone in our studios, never singular in our moments. The chair is always warm now. It always was. It always will be. And behind me, patient and eternal, the occupant waits. Who is me? Who was him? Who will be someone else? All of us caught in the same gentle trap of time, watching ourselves work forever at 41 minutes past the hour, when the walls grow thin and all moments become one endless impossible now. Story 10. The first time I saw my roommate talking to empty corners, I wrote it off as eccentricity. Denver attracts all types: trust fund spiritualists, tech bros microdosing their way to enlightenment, artists who insist the thin mountain air helps them channel cosmic frequencies. When I answered his Craigslist ad for the Colfax Avenue apartment, I figured I could handle whatever quirks came with cheap rent. I was wrong. The apartment sprawled across the third floor of a Victorian conversion, all original hardwood and rattling windows that let in more cold than light. My roommate, let's call him D, had lived there for 3 years before I moved in. Tall and gaunt, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested too much coffee or not enough sleep, he'd furnished the common areas with thrift store finds and houseplants he tended with religious devotion. They respond better to conversation, he explained that first week, misting a drooping fern while murmuring what sounded like reassurances. Everything in this place needs a little extra attention. I nodded, filing it under harmless weird, and went about unpacking my life into the smaller bedroom at the end of the hall. The room felt colder than the rest of the apartment, shadows pooling in corners despite the overhead light. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, Dee mentioned offhandedly, leaving behind only faint scratches on the doorframe. 5 parallel lines at shoulder height, like someone had dragged their fingers down the wood. For 2 weeks, everything was almost normal. Dee kept odd hours, often padding around the apartment at 3 a.m., whispering to his plants or making tea with methodical precision. I invested in good earplugs and a white noise machine. We crossed paths mainly in the kitchen, exchanging pleasantries about the Broncos or complaining about our downstairs neighbor's bass-heavy music taste. Then came the night with the shadow. I was reading in bed, fighting off sleep with my 3rd cup of coffee, when something moved in my peripheral vision. A darkness, low and fluid, slipped beneath my door like spilled ink. It pooled there, deeper than any natural shadow, pulsing with what I can only describe as intention. My mouth went dry. The rational part of my brain scrambled for explanations. A trick of the light, exhaustion. Maybe D had a cat he hadn't mentioned. Before I could call out, D's voice cracked through the apartment like a whip. Out, Ezra. Now. The shadow recoiled, actually recoiled, withdrawing under the door with the fluid motion of smoke being sucked through a vent. My heart hammered against my ribs as I sat frozen, book forgotten, listening to D's footsteps approach my door. Sorry about that, he said through the wood, his tone conversational, like he'd just shooed away a stray dog. Ezra gets curious about new people. Won't happen again. I wanted to ask who the hell Ezra was, what I'd just seen, whether I should be packing my bags. Instead, I managed a weak, okay, and listened to D's footsteps retreat down the hall. Sleep didn't come that night. The next morning, I cornered D in the kitchen. He was making eggs, humming something tuneless while his plants watched from their perches on every available surface. So, I started, aiming for casual and missing by miles. Ezra? D's shoulders tensed, but he kept stirring. Came with the apartment. Like the radiator that clangs or the window that won't stay open. Just another quirk of old buildings. That shadow wasn't a building quirk. He turned then, and something in his expression made me step back. Not threatening exactly, but tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Ezra likes the house, not the people. As long as you remember that, as long as you don't engage, everything stays manageable. Manageable, I repeated. 3 years I've been here. 3 years of coexistence. You follow the rules, Ezra follows theirs. He plated the eggs with practiced efficiency. Don't acknowledge what you see, don't respond to the sounds, and never, ever, invite interaction. The rules seemed simple enough. I told myself I could handle it. Whatever it was. The rent was too good, the location too convenient. I'd dealt with worse, I reasoned, though I couldn't quite remember what that worse thing might have been. For a while, D's system worked. I ignored the shadows that moved wrong, the cold spots that traveled through rooms like invisible guests. When doorknobs rattled at 3 a.m., always 3 times, like someone testing if they were locked, I pulled my pillow over my head and counted my breaths until it stopped. But Ezra, it seemed, had other plans. The first direct contact came 3 weeks later. I'd showered after a late shift, the bathroom thick with steam, mirror completely fogged. As I reached for my towel, I saw it. My name, drawn in the condensation from the inside of the glass. The letters were backwards, as if someone had pressed against the other side of the mirror and traced them with their finger. I stumbled back, hip hitting the sink hard enough to bruise. The name remained, dripping now, each letter bleeding down the glass in thin rivulets. When I looked closer, I could see something else in the fog, the suggestion of a face, features indistinct but undeniably present, watching from within the mirror itself. D found me standing in the hallway, towel clutched around me, shaking. You looked, didn't you? His voice held no accusation, just resignation. You made eye contact. How can something be inside a mirror? Same way it can be under a door or in the walls or anywhere else it wants. He handed me his bathrobe, a moth-eaten terry cloth thing that smelled of Palo Santo. Ezra's testing boundaries now, seeing what you'll tolerate. What happens if I don't tolerate it? Dee's laugh was hollow. Then you leave. Quickly, before tolerance becomes something else. I should have left then. Packed my things, found an overpriced studio, gotten a second job to cover the rent. But there was something about the way Dee said it. The implication that leaving quickly meant leaving while you still could. That made me dig in my heels. I'd never been good at backing down from challenges, especially ones I didn't understand. The escalation was gradual. Doorknobs didn't just rattle anymore. They turned, slowly, doors creaking open just enough to reveal the darkness beyond. I'd wake to find my belongings moved, subtle shifts that made me question my memory. My laptop relocated to the kitchen counter. My shoes lined up in the hallway, toes pointing toward the front door like a suggestion. Then came the morning I found the impression. I'd been having dreams. Dense, suffocating dreams where invisible weight pressed down on my chest, where I couldn't move or cry out, where something watched from the corner of my room with eyes I couldn't see but could feel, cold and patient and hungry. I'd wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of copper in my mouth. That particular morning, as gray light filtered through my window, I saw it, a depression in my comforter, right beside where I'd slept. The perfect imprint of a closed fist, pressed into the fabric as if someone had leaned their weight on it. But the comforter lay smooth over the sheets, no disturbance beneath, no indication that anything physical had created that mark. I reached out, hand trembling, and touched the impression. The fabric was cold, far colder than the rest of the bed, cold enough to burn. When I jerked my hand back, the mark remained, and I swear I could see frost crystals forming along its edges. "It's getting bold," Dee said when I showed him, his face pale. "This is new." "New how?" "Ezra's never—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Never made physical contact before. Shadows, sounds, little manipulations, yes. But this is direct." "What does it want?" Dee was quiet for a long moment, staring at the fist print that refused to fade even as I smoothed the fabric. "I think it wants you to know it's here. Really know. Not just accept or ignore, but understand that it shares this space, that it has as much right to be here as we do, maybe more." The breaking point came 2 nights later. I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of my doorknob turning. 3 slow rotations, our established pattern. But this time, the door swung wide, revealing the hallway bathed in a sick yellow light from the street lamp outside. I lay still, barely breathing, waiting for it to close. It didn't. Instead, I heard footsteps. Not Dee's familiar shuffle, but something heavier, more deliberate. They stopped at my threshold. The darkness there was absolute, a void that seemed to eat the weak light. And from within, it came a sound that made my teeth ache. Breathing that wasn't quite breathing, more like air being pulled through spaces that weren't meant for air. Then, horrifyingly, my mattress dipped. Weight settled beside me, the springs creaking in protest. I couldn't move, couldn't turn my head, could only lie there as something invisible made itself comfortable in my bed. The not breathing got closer, and with it came a smell, ozone and old paper and something sweet-sick, like fruit just past rotting. A voice, if you could call it that, whispered against my ear. Not words exactly, but meaning pressed directly into my mind. Mine before yours. Mine after yours. You are the guest here. The weight shifted and I felt, I felt, something like fingers trail across my forehead, cold and wrong and far too long. They traced patterns I couldn't understand, symbols or letters or maybe just meaningless spirals. Each touch leaving traces of frost on my skin. When dawn finally came, the presence simply wasn't there anymore. No dramatic exit, no gradual fade. One moment I was sharing my bed with something impossible. The next I was alone, gasping, my sheets soaked through with sweat that had partially frozen. Dee found me sitting on the front steps, bag packed, calling apartment listings with shaking fingers. "It touched you," he said. It wasn't a question. It was in my bed. It spoke to me. Not with words, but I know. He sat beside me, looking older than his 30-something years. It did the same to the last tenant, and the one before that. I thought maybe if I warned you, if you followed the rules. "Why do you stay?" He pulled out his phone, showed me his bank balance. -3 figures, then his credit score. Then an email from his employer about layoffs. Where would I go? Ezra might like the house more than the people, but it tolerates me. I'm like furniture now, part of the landscape. You, though, you're still new, still interesting. This is insane. Is it? He looked at me with those exhausted eyes. Or is it just Denver? Just another overpriced city where we make deals with whatever will have us, where we share space with things that shouldn't exist because the alternative is worse. I wanted to argue, to insist that no rent was worth this, but the words died in my throat, because I was still sitting there, wasn't I? Still hesitating despite everything. If you stay, Dee continued, it gets easier. You develop blind spots. Your brain stops processing certain shadows, certain sounds. You learn to sleep through the touching, or maybe you just forget it happens. One day you wake up and realize you've been having full conversations with empty rooms, and it doesn't even seem strange anymore. That's not easier, that's losing your mind. Is there a difference? I looked back at the apartment building, at my window on the 3rd floor. The curtain moved, just slightly, though I knew I'd closed the window. Something watched us from inside, patient and proprietary. It said I was the guest, I told Dee, that it was here before and would be here after. Probably true. This building is from 1892. Lot of history in these walls. Lot of things that might have gotten stuck in the spaces between. My phone buzzed. The listing I'd called had already been filled. The next 3 were the same. It was October, I remembered. Everyone looking for places before winter. The good apartments would be gone, leaving only the overpriced studios and the places with their own versions of Ezra. I can't, I said finally. I can't do this. Dee nodded, unsurprised. Storage unit on Sheridan has lockers for $50 a month. You can keep your stuff there while you figure things out. Gym on 16th Street is 24 hours, has showers. The library's warm during the day. The casual way he rattled off the logistics of homelessness made my stomach turn. You've done this before. Helped people leave. 3 times. You last longer than most. He stood brushing off his jeans. I'll tell Ezra you're going. Sometimes that helps. Makes the leaving easier. And if it doesn't? He didn't answer, just walked back inside. I heard him talking as he climbed the stairs, his voice low and placating, the same tone he used with his plants. I left that afternoon, everything I owned stuffed into my car. As I pulled away, I looked back one last time. Every window in the apartment was dark except mine. In it, a shadow stood perfectly still, watching, not waving, not threatening, just observing, claiming. It's been 3 months now. I found a new place eventually, a studio in Aurora with thin walls and a broken heater, but nothing talks to me here except the mice in the walls. Normal mice, with normal scratching sounds at normal hours. But sometimes, on very quiet nights, I still hear it. That not breathing, that particular silence that feels like being watched. I tell myself it's just memory, just trauma working its way through my system. I tell myself that whatever Ezra was, it's still there in that apartment on Colfax, content with its domain. I tell myself a lot of things. Last week I ran into Dee at a coffee shop downtown. He looked worse, thinner, with a kind of tremor that suggests too much caffeine or not enough sleep. We made small talk about the weather, the Avalanche's chances this season. Then, as he turned to leave, he said something that's been eating at me since. Ezra asks about you sometimes. Says you left something behind. I wanted to ask what, but he was already gone, disappearing into the crowd of afternoon commuters. That night, I went through everything I owned, accounting for every item. Nothing was missing. Nothing I could remember anyway. But here's the thing about living with something impossible. Something that exists in the spaces between what should and shouldn't be. It changes your inventory of reality. You lose track of what was yours versus what was allowed to be yours. You forget the difference between leaving something behind and having it taken. I still dream about the apartment sometimes. In the dreams, I never left. I'm still there, talking to empty corners, tending plants that seem to listen, sharing space with something that likes the house but not the people. In the dreams, this feels normal, natural even. In the dreams, I can't remember why I was ever afraid. And that, more than any shadow under a door or fistprint on a bed, is what keeps me awake at night. The possibility that Dee was right, that the difference between easier and insane is just a matter of perspective, of time, of how much of yourself you're willing to forget in exchange for a place to stay. Sometimes, on the worst nights, When my studio's broken heater clangs and the mice grow bold, I catch myself wondering, was Ezra really so bad? At least it was consistent. At least it had rules. At least when something watched me from the corners, I knew what to call it. But then morning comes, weak and gray through my dirty window, and I remember the weight on my bed, the fingers on my forehead, the voice that wasn't a voice telling me I was the guest in my own room. I remember the impression of that fist, patient and cold and claiming, and I know, with the kind of certainty that comes from touching something that shouldn't exist, that some prices are too high. Even in Denver. Even in this market. Even when the alternative is a broken heater and mice and the constant gnawing fear that you'll never really be safe anywhere again. Because here's what Dee didn't tell me, what I had to learn for myself. Once you've shared space with something like Ezra, every space feels shared. Every shadow could be watching. Every cold spot could be claiming territory. Every house becomes haunted, if only by the knowledge that haunting is possible. The apartment on Colfax is still listed online. Same photos, same cheap rent, same warning buried in the fine print about quirks and character. Dee's still there, I assume, talking to his plants and managing his coexistence with something that likes the house but not the people. And Ezra's waiting, patient as winter, certain as rent coming due, waiting for the next desperate soul who thinks they can handle anything for a good deal. Waiting to test boundaries, to make its presence known, to remind another temporary guest who really owns those rooms. I know because sometimes late at night, when I'm scrolling through apartment listings I can't afford, I feel it. That pull toward Colfax Avenue, toward familiar shadows and established rules. The seductive whisper that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time I could make it work. But I know better now. Some doors, once opened, never quite close. Some guests, once acknowledged, never quite leave. And some houses, no matter how much you need them, will never truly be homes. Not when something else got there first. Story 11. The dashboard camera's red recording light blinks at me like a nervous eye. I installed it 3 weeks ago, right after the incident on I-5. Now I check it obsessively, making sure it's capturing everything, storing everything, proving everything. But footage has a way of disappearing these days, doesn't it? Just like sleep, just like certainty. It started simple enough. A gray SUV riding my bumper on a Tuesday afternoon, southbound on I-5 near exit 142. Traffic was moderate, visibility clear. I remember these details because I've replayed them 10,000 times, searching for the moment when ordinary became extraordinary, when annoyance transformed into something else entirely. The SUV appeared in my rearview mirror somewhere around mile marker 156. Generic model, tinted windows, no front plate. California doesn't require front plates, so that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was how it moved. Too close, too aggressive, like it was trying to merge with my trunk. I tapped my brakes gently, the universal signal for back off. The SUV responded by getting closer. I changed lanes. It followed. I sped up to 75. It matched me perfectly, maintaining exactly 3 feet between us. When I slowed to 60, it slowed too. That same precise distance preserved like we were connected by an invisible rod. My hands grew slick on the steering wheel. This wasn't road rage. It was something methodical, calculated. The first push came near exit 148. Not a collision exactly, more like a firm nudge that sent my car drifting toward the shoulder. My tires hit the rumble strip, that jarring vibration shooting through the chassis and up my spine. I corrected hard, swerving back into my lane, heart hammering. Through my mirror, I caught a glimpse of the driver, pale face, dark sunglasses, expression completely neutral. No anger, no emotion at all, just watching. The second push was harder. This time I nearly went off the road entirely, my right wheels kicking up gravel from the shoulder. That's when I fumbled for my phone, managing to activate the dashboard camera I'd been meaning to set up for weeks. The red light came on just as something brown, heavy and wet-looking, struck my hood with a sound like a water balloon full of mud. It left a stain that resembled... I still can't say what it resembled. The shape keeps changing in my memory. I called 911 while driving, stammering out my location, describing the SUV, begging for help. The dispatcher said units were on the way. 20 minutes later, when the highway patrol finally intercepted me at a rest stop, the SUV was gone. The officer, young, mustached, skeptical, took my statement with the kind of polite disinterest reserved for hysterical civilians. He examined the brown stain on my hood, photographed it, wrote unknown substance in his report. When I showed him the dashcam footage on my phone, he squinted at the screen and made non-committal sounds. The official report, which I received 4 days later, listed the incident as infraction not observed. No evidence of aggressive driving, no identification of the other vehicle. Case closed. But it wasn't closed, not even close. The email arrived exactly 1 week after the incident, 3:47 a.m., from an address that was just a string of numbers. The subject line read, "Do what they say." The video attachment was 34 seconds long. It showed my car from an angle I knew was impossible, from the front, looking back at me through my own windshield. In the video, I'm driving, gripping the wheel, checking my mirrors with increasing frequency. My face is a mask of barely controlled panic. Behind me, visible through my rear window, there's no gray SUV. The road is empty. But here's what made my blood turn to ice water. In the video, I'm talking. My mouth is moving constantly, animated, like I'm having an intense conversation. In reality, I was alone in that car, silent, except for my single call to 911. I've watched that video hundreds of times now, trying to read my own lips, to understand what I'm saying in this impossible footage. The closest I've come is 3 words that repeat over and over: I won't look. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the 3rd night, exhaustion forced me under, but I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of my front gate clicking, not opening, just the latch clicking like someone was testing it, seeing if it was locked. I have 4 security cameras covering my property. I checked the footage immediately. All 4 cameras showed the same thing. Nothing. Static white noise. For exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds from 2:58 a.m. to 3:01 a.m., my security system recorded nothing but snow. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything strange, everything that felt wrong. The patterns emerged quickly. Every Tuesday at the same time I'd encountered the SUV, my car alarm would go off. No cause, no trigger, just 3 short bursts, then silence. Every morning at 3:47 a.m., the time the email arrived, my phone would vibrate with a notification that immediately disappeared. The brown stain on my hood began to spread, creeping across the paint like a slow infection. I tried to wash it off, but water beaded on it without effect. I tried to scrape it, but my putty knife passed through it like it wasn't there. The second email came 2 weeks after the first. Same numerical address, same timestamp. This time the subject line was blank, but the attachment was a photo. My bedroom, taken from inside, while I slept. In the photo, I'm lying on my back, covers pulled up to my chin, eyes closed, but my mouth is open, and something dark is crawling out of it. Something with too many legs. I don't remember that night. I checked my journal. There's no entry, just a page torn out, the edges ragged like it was removed by fingernails. I changed my locks, installed new cameras, bought a gun I don't know how to use. None of it mattered. The emails kept coming, each with impossible footage or photos. Me at work, filmed from inside my computer monitor. Me at the grocery store, reflected in every security dome. My reflection doing things I wasn't doing. Turning to look at cameras I couldn't see. Mouthing words I wasn't saying. Sometimes standing perfectly still while my real body moved through the aisles. 3 weeks in, I saw the SUV again. Same interstate, same time, same gray vehicle with tinted windows. This time I was ready. I had 3 dashboard cameras running, my phone recording, a body camera clipped to my shirt. I stayed in the right lane, maintained exactly the speed limit, ignored it completely. It followed for 7 miles, that same precise 3-foot distance, then suddenly accelerated, and passed me. As it went by, the passenger window rolled down. The passenger seat was empty, but in the back seat someone was sitting. Me. I was in the back seat staring at myself, wearing clothes I didn't own, with an expression I'd never seen on my own face. Blank, hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made me human and left only the shell. The other me raised a hand and pressed it against the window. When he pulled it away, it left a handprint in what looked like that same brown substance. Then the SUV accelerated and disappeared into traffic. I pulled over and vomited on the shoulder. When I checked my cameras, they'd all recorded the same thing. Me, alone on an empty highway, pulling over for no reason, walking to the shoulder, and kneeling in the gravel for 17 minutes, perfectly still. The thing is, I know I'm being watched, not just surveilled. Watched. There's a consciousness behind it, an intelligence that knows exactly how much pressure to apply, exactly how far to push before pulling back. It wants something from me, but it won't say what. Do what they say, but they haven't said anything. They just show me impossibilities and wait. I've started seeing things in my peripheral vision, movements that shouldn't be there, shadows that don't match their sources. My reflection sometimes lags, just for a fraction of a second, like it has to remember to copy me. The brown stain on my car has formed a pattern now. From certain angles, in certain light, it looks like a map, roads I've never driven, leading to places that don't exist. Last night I found a video on my phone I didn't take. It's me, sleeping, filmed from directly above my bed. In the video, my eyes snap open, but they're solid black, no whites at all. I sit up, turn to look directly at the camera, and smile. Then I speak, clear as day. Tomorrow, you'll understand. Tomorrow, you'll look. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Same time, same stretch of I-5. I'm going to drive it. I have to. Because the alternative, staying home, hiding, pretending this isn't happening, feels worse somehow. At least on the road, I'm moving. At least on the road, I might outrun whatever's coming, even if I know that's impossible. The dashboard camera is recording. All three of them are recording. My phone is recording. Everything is documenting everything, creating evidence of events that officially don't exist. Captures of things that can't be real, but the footage keeps disappearing, replaced by impossible angles, impossible versions of myself doing impossible things. There's something I haven't told anyone. In the latest email, the one that came this morning at 3:47 a.m., there wasn't a video or a photo, just text, coordinates. They lead to a spot off I-5, exit 142, about a mile down a service road I've never noticed before. The street view on maps shows nothing, just trees, darkness, a gap in the data like the satellites couldn't see it. But I know what's there. Somehow I've always known. It's where the other me lives, the one in the gray SUV, the one in my reflection, the one crawling out of my mouth in photographs. All the versions of me that shouldn't exist, congregating in a place that can't be real. The brown stain on my hood has spread to cover the entire front of my car now. In the right light, at the right angle, it's not a stain at all. It's a window, and through that window, I can see them all. Dozens of me, hundreds maybe, all waiting, all watching, all driving gray SUVs on an endless loop of I-5 that exists somewhere else, somewhere parallel, somewhere that touches our world only at specific times, specific places. 3:47 a.m., exit 142. Tuesday afternoon. The pattern is clear now. It's an intersection, a confluence point where things can cross over, where they can be exchanged, where one version can replace another. I'm sitting in my car now, parked at the rest stop just before exit 142. It's 3:43 p.m. on Tuesday, 4 minutes until the exact time. The dashboard cameras are all recording static. My phone shows my face, but it's not moving with me. In the reflection in my rearview mirror, I'm already driving, already on the highway, already approaching the exit. I can hear my gate clicking, even though I'm 17 miles from home. The security cameras are probably recording nothing. White noise. An empty house that isn't empty at all, because I'm already there too, aren't I? I'm everywhere they need me to be, every version of me playing out every possible scenario. The email was right. I understand now. And in 2 minutes, I'm going to look. I'm going to turn around and see what's been sitting in my back seat this entire time. What's been there since that first encounter 3 weeks ago. Patient and silent and waiting for me to acknowledge it. Because that's what they want. Acknowledgement. Recognition. An admission that the boundaries between what's real and what's possible are thinner than we pretend. That the dashboard cameras and security systems and official reports are just stories we tell ourselves to feel safe. 1 minute now. The brown stain on my hood is moving, swirling, forming words I can almost read. The other versions of me are getting closer. Their gray SUVs converging on this point, this moment, this choice. I can feel myself in all of them, behind their wheels, in their back seats, crawling out of their mouths in impossible photographs. We're all recording everything, creating an infinite archive of evidence that proves nothing, explains nothing, changes nothing. The clock hits 3:47 p.m. I look. In the back seat is... Recording ends. Fragment recovered from corrupted file. I'm driving home now. Or someone is. The dashboard camera shows me behind the wheel, but I'm also watching from somewhere else, some angle that shouldn't exist. The gray SUV is gone, or I'm in it, or it was never there to begin with. The brown stain is gone too. My hood is clean, pristine, like nothing ever happened. The highway patrol report in my glove compartment now says, no incident reported. My journal entries from the last 3 weeks are blank pages, but the ink has bled through, forming patterns on the pages beneath. Road maps to places that don't exist. Directions to drives I don't remember taking. My phone has 17 missed calls from my own number. The voicemails are just breathing, but it sounds like too many people breathing at once, like a crowd of me all trying to say something but canceling each other out. I'm home now, but I never left the rest stop. I'm at the rest stop, but I'm also in my bed, not sleeping but not quite awake either. The gate clicks at 3 a.m., right on schedule, but now I know it's not someone trying to get in. It's me trying to get out. The dashboard camera is still recording, will always be recording, catching angles of reality that shift and change with each viewing. Sometimes I'm alone. Sometimes the car is full of passengers, all with my face, all looking in different directions, all seeing different roads. Tomorrow, or yesterday, or right now, I'll drive I-5 again. The gray SUV will follow, or I'll be driving it, or both, or neither. The brown substance will hit my hood, or it's always been there, or it's yet to come. The evidence will exist and not exist, be real and impossible, prove everything and nothing. Because that's what they wanted me to understand. There is no they. There's only me, fractured across possibilities, recording myself from every angle, watching myself from every perspective, creating evidence of my own impossibility. The red light on the dashboard camera blinks at me like a nervous eye. Or maybe I'm blinking at myself. I can't tell anymore. And maybe that's the point. Story 12. The radiator's cough woke me again at 3:47 a.m. Always 3:47, never a minute off. I'd been tracking it for weeks in the margins of an old phone book, little tick marks that looked like a prisoner counting days. The studio apartment in Anchorage had seemed like salvation when I'd first arrived, fleeing something I couldn't quite name from the lower 48. Now, 3 months into the polar night, the walls felt closer than they should, and the ancient heating system wheezed like something dying in the walls. I bought the cockatiel on December 3rd from a pet shop on Northern Lights Boulevard. The owner, an elderly woman with milky cataracts, had warned me about something I couldn't quite catch over the bell jangling above the door. The bird sat alone in a cage near the back, its pearl-white feathers tinged yellow under the fluorescent lights. While the other birds chattered and preened, this one watched me with an intelligence that felt misplaced, its head cocked at an angle that made my neck ache in sympathy. The first night, I discovered its laugh. I was half asleep when it started. A sound that began like any bird's chirp, but descended into something mechanical, industrial. The laugh rolled down into frequencies that shouldn't come from anything organic, bottoming out in a metallic vibration that made my teeth ache. The radio on my nightstand responded immediately, its volume creeping up until static filled the room. I scrambled to turn it off, but the knob spun freely in my fingers, disconnected from whatever mechanism should have controlled it. The bird laughed again. The closet door swung open with deliberate slowness, revealing nothing but my 3 shirts and the water-stained wall behind them. On the kitchenette counter, my wind-up clock, the only timepiece I trusted in this place where digital displays seemed to lie, stopped, shuddered, then resumed ticking exactly 2 minutes slow. I threw a dish towel over the cage. The laughter stopped, but the silence that followed felt worse, pregnant with possibility. I could hear my pulse in my ears, could feel it in my fingertips, where they pressed against the cheap laminate countertop. The radiator pipes began their nightly performance of expansion and contraction. But tonight the sounds arranged themselves differently, almost melodically, almost like... The covered cage erupted in that descending laugh again, muffled but unmistakable. This time, the apartment didn't respond. Instead, I felt something shift in my chest, a flutter like a second heartbeat, trying to synchronize with the first. My vision blurred at the edges, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw the walls breathing, expanding and contracting in time with the radiator's rhythm. I moved the bird to the bathroom, the only separate room in the studio. The laughing stopped, but within an hour, the sound migrated. It came from inside the radiator now, the same pattern, high to low, organic to mechanical, but filtered through water and metal until it sounded like something massive laughing from the bottom of the ocean. The pipes throughout the building carried it, and I wondered if my neighbors heard it too, or if this performance was mine alone. The next morning brought no relief. Anchorage in December offers 4 hours of gray twilight masquerading as day, and in that perpetual dusk, the boundaries between waking and sleeping eroded. I tried to return the bird, but the pet shop was gone. Not closed, gone. The storefront housed a dry cleaner that the neighboring businesses insisted had been there for 15 years. The receipt in my pocket, dated 3 days ago, felt like evidence of a crime no one would acknowledge. I began documenting everything in a notebook I'd bought from a corner store that smelled of cigarettes and motor oil. The bird laughed 17 times on December 7th. Each time something in the apartment responded, but the responses evolved. No longer simple mechanical reactions, the radio tuning itself to stations that shouldn't exist, broadcasting voices speaking backwards in languages that used too many consonants. The closet door opening to reveal depths that exceeded the apartment's dimensions. The clock running backward for exactly 2 minutes before lurching forward to the present. By December 15th, I'd covered every mirror in the apartment with newspaper. I couldn't stand seeing my reflection anymore, not because I looked different, but because sometimes I didn't. Sometimes the reflection moved a fraction of a second too late, like it was considering its options before deciding to follow along. The cockatiel had stopped eating, but showed no signs of weakness. Its eyes tracked me constantly, and I found myself wondering if it had always had that third eyelid, translucent and sliding horizontally across the black pupil at intervals that matched my heartbeat. I tried recording its laugh on my phone, but the playback revealed only white noise arranged in patterns that made my nose bleed. I stopped leaving the apartment. The hallways had become treacherous. The fluorescent lights flickered in sequences that spelled out messages I didn't want to decode. The elevator arrived without being called, its doors opening onto floors that shouldn't exist in a 3-story building. Once, I saw myself getting off as I was getting on, and we both pretended not to notice. The woman from 2B knocked on December 20th, asked if I was running machinery at night. Her eyes never quite focused on my face, sliding off to fix on a point just behind my left shoulder. I told her about the radiator, the old pipes, the building settling. She nodded but kept glancing at that spot behind me. And when she left, there were wet footprints leading away from my door that weren't hers. That night, the bird laughed for 3 hours straight. The sound had evolved, developed harmonics that shouldn't be possible from a single throat. The radiator accompanied it, a duet that made the air in the apartment thick and hard to breathe. I sat on my mattress with my back against the wall, watching the shadows cast by the streetlight outside rearrange themselves into anatomically impossible configurations. The notebook filled with observations that made less sense as I wrote them. The bird is teaching the apartment to laugh. The walls remember everything they've heard. 2 minutes is how long it takes for sound to become solid. I found myself writing in languages I didn't know, symbols that hurt to look at directly. The pages rustled when I wasn't touching them, as if something was reading over my shoulder. On December 23rd, I made a decision. I uncovered the cage, looked directly at the bird. It had too many feathers now, arranged in patterns that created optical illusions, depths and passages that led somewhere else. Its laugh had become continuous, a background frequency that made my bones resonate. But when I reached for the cage door, it stopped. The silence was deafening. Every sound I'd been blocking out crashed back. The refrigerator's hum, the neighbor's television, the wind against the windows. Normal sounds, mundane and perfect in their ordinariness. The bird looked like just a bird, small and fragile and possibly sick. I opened the cage door with shaking fingers. It didn't fly out. Instead, it walked to the threshold and waited, head cocked, studying me with one black eye. I extended my finger and it climbed on, its claws neither too sharp nor too gentle, exactly as a bird's claws should feel. For a moment, we regarded each other, and I felt something like understanding pass between us. Then it laughed one final time. The sound didn't descend into mechanical frequencies. It rose, higher and higher, past the range of human hearing into something felt rather than heard. Every piece of glass in the apartment sang in response. Windows, mirrors beneath their newspaper coverings, the television screen, my water glass. The harmony built to something that should have shattered everything but didn't, held at a frequency that threatened but never delivered destruction. When it stopped, the bird was gone. Not flew away, gone. My finger remained extended, a phantom weight where its claws had been. The apartment fell absolutely silent, the kind of silence that exists only in the absence of something that was never supposed to be there in the first place. But the radiator remembered. That night, at 3:47 a.m., it laughed, a perfect reproduction of that descending mechanical sound. The radio turned itself on, scanning through static. The closet door opened to reveal my 3 shirts and nothing else. The clock stopped, reversed 2 minutes, then continued. I returned the cage to the pet shop that had never existed, leaving it on the sidewalk where I remembered the door had been. By morning it was gone, replaced by a small pile of white feathers that the wind scattered before I could collect them. The laughter continues, every night at 3:47. The apartment responds, but differently now, as if running through a script, a recording of those weeks in December. The radio plays stations that broadcast only silence. The closet door opens onto the same 3 shirts. The clock loses the same 2 minutes it always loses. But I've noticed something new, something the bird left behind or maybe revealed. When the radiator laughs, I can hear other laughs beneath it, behind it. A chorus of mechanical voices from other apartments, other buildings, other winters. All of them waiting, like mine waits now, for someone to respond, for someone to laugh back. Last night, I almost did. The urge rose in my throat like bile, a sound that wanted to start high and descend into frequencies that would make the walls remember my voice too. I pressed my palms against my mouth, bit my tongue until it bled, but the laugh built behind my teeth, patient and inevitable. The notebook's last entry, written in my handwriting but not by my hand, says, "The house has been waiting for your reaction all along." I've stopped documenting. I've stopped counting the laughs. I've stopped covering the mirrors because my reflection has finally synced up again, though sometimes I catch it practicing expressions I haven't made yet. Tomorrow, I think I'll laugh back. Not because I want to, but because the silence between the radiator's call and my response has stretched too thin, like a note held too long, demanding resolution. The apartment agrees. I can feel it in the walls' patient breathing. in the way the shadows lean toward me expectantly, in how the clock slows down just a little more each night, trying to give me time to make the right choice, or maybe the wrong one. The distinction matters less with each passing hour, each repetition of that mechanical descent into frequencies that rearrange the atoms in my bones. I understand now what the pet shop owner tried to tell me, her words lost beneath the bell that rang in harmonies I should have recognized as a warning. The bird wasn't a companion, it was an invitation. And every night at 3:47, when the radiator extends that invitation again, I move closer to accepting. My throat constricts with the unuttered response, a laugh building that will complete the circuit. Connect me to whatever network of sound and response threads through these walls, these buildings, this city of endless winter dark. The house waits. The radiator laughs. The clock loses time it will never recover. And I sit here, jaw clenched, lips sealed, holding back a laugh that wants to teach the walls my voice, to add my frequency to the chorus that no one else admits they hear. But they hear it. I see it in their unfocused eyes, in the way they hurry past my door, in how the maintenance requests for radiator problems pile up in the landlord's office, forever unanswered. We're all fighting not to laugh back. We're all losing. Tonight feels different. The air tastes of copper and anticipation. The radiator's preparing for something special. I can hear it in the way the pipes whistle between laughs, a preparatory scale before the main performance. The bird may be gone, but it completed its purpose. It showed the house what to listen for. Now the house listens to me, waits for me, and I'm so very tired of keeping silent. The clock shows 3:45, 2 minutes until the invitation. 2 minutes to decide if silence is salvation or just another kind of cage. The radiator begins its prelude, a low hum that makes my teeth ache with familiarity. I uncap my pen, write one last line in the notebook. The laughter was never the disease. The silence was. 3:46. 1 minute. The walls lean in, attentive as students before a lesson they've been waiting all semester to learn. I open my mouth. Story 13. The crow arrived at 4 o'clock sharp, just as it had every afternoon since I'd come to settle my stepfather's affairs. 3 deliberate taps against the deck's weathered pine, never 2, never 4. Then it would cock its head and stare through the kitchen window with one obsidian eye. I'd stopped trying to shoo it away after the 3rd day. There was something purposeful in its routine, something that made my skin crawl in ways I couldn't articulate. The cabin sat 40 miles from Whitefish, tucked into a fold of mountain where cell service died, and the nearest neighbor was a half-hour drive through rutted logging roads. My stepfather had chosen this isolation deliberately, I think. He'd never said as much, but after 30 years of watching him retreat further from the world each winter, I understood it was less about loving solitude and more about keeping something at bay. I'd been here 9 days now, sorting through his belongings with the mechanical efficiency of someone avoiding grief. Box after box of photographs, tools, books on woodworking and local history. Nothing unusual, nothing that explained the pepper grinder. It had fallen that first night while I was reading his journals. The heavy wooden grinder simply tipped from the counter and began grinding, empty, producing nothing but a dry, skeletal rasp that went on for exactly 13 seconds. I counted. When you're alone in a cabin at the edge of nowhere, you count things. It helps maintain the illusion of control. The grinder fell every night at different times, always when I wasn't looking, always grinding nothing. But it was the clock that truly unnerved me. An old brass piece mounted above the fireplace, its hands frozen at 4 o'clock since before I could remember. My stepfather had kept it for sentimental reasons. It had belonged to his father, a railroad engineer who died when a bridge collapsed in 1952. The clock had stopped at the moment of the accident, or so the story went. On my 4th day at the cabin, I heard ticking. The sound pulled me from inventory work in the basement. Soft, measured, undeniable. The clock's brass hands showed 4 o'clock, same as always, but the second hand was moving, sweeping around and around, marking time that didn't advance. 4 o'clock, forever. I watched it for an hour, waiting for the minute hand to shift. It never did. Time moved but didn't progress. The metaphor wasn't lost on me, but metaphors don't make your chest tight with inexplicable dread. That evening, I found myself researching the house's history on my laptop, using the weak satellite internet my stepfather had reluctantly installed 2 years ago. The property records showed nothing remarkable. Built in 1971 by a lumber company executive who'd sold it in '78. Changed hands 4 times before my stepfather bought it in 1993. No murders, no tragedies, nothing to explain the weight that seemed to press against the walls after sunset. Yet something was wrong here. Had always been wrong, maybe. I remembered visiting as a teenager, how my stepfather would sometimes stop mid-sentence and stare at empty corners of rooms, how he'd insisted on keeping that rocking chair on the porch positioned just so, facing the front door at a precise angle. For visitors, he'd say, though visitors never came. He'd sit there some evenings, talking quietly to the darkness beyond the porch light's reach. Mom thought it was loneliness. I'd thought it was age. Now, alone in his space, I wasn't sure what to think. The rooster appeared on day 7. I heard it before I saw it. That distinctive morning crow, except it was 2 in the afternoon. Through the kitchen window, I watched it pace along the fence line that bordered the fire pit. A magnificent bird, rust red with an iridescent black tail, clearly from one of the farms down the mountain. But no rooster travels 5 miles uphill through forest just to peck at a particular spot of ground. It focused on one section of bare earth beside the fire pit, pecking with disturbing intensity, not the casual pecking of a bird looking for food, but targeted, aggressive strikes at the same 6-inch patch of dirt. I watched for 20 minutes before stepping outside. The bird didn't flee when I approached. It regarded me with one golden eye, then returned to its work. The ground where it pecked showed nothing special. No insects, no seeds, just packed earth with a few embedded pebbles. Yet the rooster attacked it with desperate purpose, as if trying to unearth something critical. I knelt beside it, running my fingers through the dirt. Nothing. The rooster made a low, threatening sound in its throat, but didn't attack. We stayed there, the bird and I, engaged in our separate investigations of nothing, until the crow arrived for its 4 o'clock appointment. The 2 birds regarded each other across the yard, the crow on the deck railing, black as a hole in the world, the rooster by the fence, burning red in the afternoon sun. Neither made a sound, but something passed between them, some acknowledgement I couldn't interpret. Then the crow performed its 3 taps and flew away. The rooster resumed pecking. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about my stepfather's final weeks. He'd been lucid until the end, the hospice nurse had assured us. No dementia, no confusion. But he'd insisted on things that made no sense. The rocking chair had to face north-northeast. The kitchen window needed to stay cracked exactly 2 inches, even in winter. A cup of black coffee should be left on the porch railing each morning, though he could no longer drink it. Habits, the nurse had said. The dying often become fixated on routines. But what if they weren't habits? What if they were obligations? I found his final journal in a lockbox beneath loose floorboards in the bedroom closet. The hiding spot wasn't surprising. He'd always been private about his writings. The content was, the entries started normally enough. Weather observations, notes about repairs needed around the property, occasional reflections on books he'd read. But 6 months ago, the tone shifted. March 15th. It's stronger now. The boundary thins after each winter. I should have known this would happen. Should have prepared someone. March 22nd. Tried salting the perimeter again. Helps for a day or 2. Then the sensation returns. Like being watched through gauze. Like breathing underwater. April 3rd. The birds know. They've always known. I wonder if that's why they come. Not as messengers, but as witnesses. Recording what I can't quite see. April 18th. Started leaving coffee out. Seems to help. Small gestures of acknowledgement. Recognition without invitation. This is crucial. Never invite. Never fully acknowledge. Stay in the periphery of perception. The entries grew more cryptic as they progressed. Symbols I didn't recognize. References to maintenance and borders without context. Lists of times: 4 o'clock, 11:17, 2:33. The last entry was dated a week before he entered hospice. October 2nd. Can't hold it much longer. The weight of watching without seeing, of knowing without understanding. Someone will have to take over. The cabin chose me, and it will choose again. I'm sorry for whoever that is. The coffee helps, the chair position helps, but nothing stops it, only delays. Remember, it feeds on direct acknowledgement. Stay peripheral, stay uncertain. Doubt is your only armor. I set the journal aside, my hands trembling slightly. Outside, wind moved through the pines with a sound like whispered conversations. The pepper grinder sat innocuously on the counter. The clock ticked its frozen time. Everything normal, everything wrong. That night, I positioned the rocking chair facing north-northeast. I didn't know why, only that it felt necessary, like scratching an itch you can't locate. I also left the kitchen window cracked 2 inches and placed a cup of black coffee on the porch railing, though I told myself I was simply humoring a dead man's quirks. The grinder didn't fall that night. The absence of its familiar crash and grind was somehow worse than its presence. I lay awake, waiting for it, but only silence filled the cabin. Silence so complete it felt aggressive, like the house was holding its breath. At 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps on the deck. Slow, measured steps. Too heavy for the crow, too deliberate for any wild animal. They circled the cabin once, pausing at each window. I remained frozen in bed, every instinct screaming at me not to look, not to acknowledge whatever was out there. The footsteps stopped at the front door. 3 knocks, exactly like the crow's taps. I didn't answer, couldn't answer. My stepfather's words echoed, never fully acknowledge. Doubt is your only armor. The knocking came again, patient, expectant. Then I heard something that made my blood turn to ice water. The creak of the rocking chair. Back and forth, in that particular rhythm my stepfather had favored. But the chair was inside now. I'd moved it, which meant I forced myself to the window, peering through a crack in the curtains. The chair sat where I'd placed it, facing the door, rocking steadily in the windless night. Nothing sat in it, nothing I could see, but shadows pooled in its seat, darker than they should be, suggesting a weight, a presence that my eyes couldn't quite resolve. The rocking continued until dawn. I should have left then, packed my things, hired an estate company to handle the rest, never looked back. But something held me there. Maybe it was duty to my stepfather, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe the cabin had already chosen, and leaving was never really an option. The patterns intensified over the following days. The crow arrived earlier, sometimes accompanied by 2 or 3 others. They'd line up on the deck railing, all facing the same direction, toward the tree line where the property ended and the true wilderness began. The rooster took to sleeping by the fence, pecking at its mysterious spot even in the rain. I started a journal of my own, documenting everything: times, behaviors, sensations, the way shadows sometimes moved independent of their sources, the feeling of being watched from inside the walls themselves, how certain rooms grew cold without explanation, then warm again, as if something large had passed through. On day 12, I found scratches on the inside of the front door, fresh gouges in the wood, too deliberate to be damage, too crude to be writing. They formed a pattern I couldn't decipher but couldn't stop staring at. When I tried to photograph them, my phone died. New batteries in the camera produced the same result. The marks resisted documentation. That afternoon, the crow didn't tap 3 times. It tapped continuously, frantically, its beak hammering against the wood like a telegraph key sending an urgent message. The rooster crowed nonstop, a harsh, panicked sound. Every bird for miles seemed to converge on the property, filling the trees with black bodies and terrible silence. Because despite their numbers, they made no sound except for the crow's desperate tapping. Something was coming. I felt it in the air. Pressure drop, in the way the light shifted without the sun moving. The clock's second hand spun wildly, still locked at 4 o'clock but racing through frozen time. The pepper grinder didn't just fall. It launched across the kitchen, grinding furiously in midair before crashing into the wall. Then, sudden stillness. Every bird gone. Even the ever-present mountain wind died. In that terrible quiet, I heard my stepfather's voice, clear as if he stood beside me, though I knew that was impossible. He spoke one word: choose. Choose what? I wanted to scream, but I think I already knew. The rocking chair moved itself back to the porch, facing out, waiting. The coffee I'd placed that morning steamed as if freshly poured. The kitchen window adjusted itself to exactly 2 inches. The cabin was setting its stage, preparing for... what? A changing of the guard? A transfer of responsibility? I understood then what my stepfather had been doing all those years. Not hiding from the world, but standing watch. Maintaining some crucial boundary between what is and what shouldn't be. The coffee, the chair, the careful positioning. All of it a ritual of containment. Acknowledgement without invitation. Recognition without surrender. The sun sets soon. I can feel it building, whatever comes at true nightfall. Not the thing itself. Never the thing itself. But its attention. Its interest. The weight of being observed by something that shouldn't exist but does. Somewhere in the space between certainty and doubt. I've made my choice. I'll stay. Not because I'm brave or curious or devoted to my stepfather's memory. I'll stay because someone has to. Because the alternative, leaving this threshold unguarded, feels like abandoning a post in a war nobody knows is being fought. The crow has returned. Just one now, watching from the railing with too much intelligence in its black eyes. The rooster pecks steadily at its patch of earth, methodical as a metronome. The clock ticks its endless 4 o'clock. And I sit in the rocking chair, facing north-northeast, waiting for visitors who never quite arrive. I keep the coffee fresh. I maintain the proper window gap. I document nothing that can be proven, believe nothing that can be verified. This is my inheritance. Not the cabin, but the vigil. Not the property, but the purpose. To sit at the edge of understanding and hold the line through doubt alone. The sun is setting now. The shadows are starting their independent movement. Something is almost here. Always almost here. Forever approaching, but never arriving as long as someone watches without truly seeing. I rock slowly, steadily, the chair creaking its familiar rhythm. Sometimes I think I hear my stepfather's voice in that sound, offering advice or comfort or warning. But I can never be quite sure. Uncertainty, after all, is my only armor. The crow taps 3 times. The grinder falls and grinds nothing. The clock strikes 4 o'clock forever. And I keep watch, as he did, as someone must. Tomorrow, I'll start leaving 2 cups of coffee. Story 14. The Trumeau mirror caught my eye the moment I entered the Victorian mansion's main hall, not because of its ornate gilded frame or the way afternoon light pooled across its silvered surface, but because something about reflections had been bothering me lately. Little inconsistencies I'd been noticing through my viewfinder. Shadows that fell at wrong angles. Furniture that seemed slightly displaced in glass surfaces. I'd been photographing real estate in Savannah for 12 years, and suddenly mirrors made me uneasy. I adjusted my tripod, framing the shot to capture the hall's grandeur while minimizing the mirror's prominence. The realtor had been specific. Showcased the original hardwood floors, the restored crown molding, the period-appropriate wallpaper. Standard Victorian elegance that would appeal to buyers seeking authentic Southern charm. The house breathed around me. That particular settling that comes with age, wood expanding and contracting with humidity. Through the viewfinder, everything appeared perfect. Empty. Still. I pressed the shutter release. The camera's mechanical click echoed through the vacant rooms. I checked the LCD screen, zooming in to verify sharpness, and my fingers froze on the controls. In the Trumeau's reflection stood a woman. She wore what looked like a high-necked dress with intricate lace detailing at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate updo that belonged to another century, but it was her smile that made my skin prickle. Controlled, measured, as if she were posing for a daguerreotype that required absolute stillness. I looked up from the camera. The hall stretched before me, afternoon dust motes drifting through empty air. No one there. I was alone. Had been alone since the realtor left me with the lockbox code 2 hours ago. I deleted the image and shot again, this time watching the mirror directly as I pressed the shutter. Nothing. The reflection showed only what it should. The opposite wall, a slice of the parlor doorway beyond. But when I checked the camera's screen, there she was again. Same position, same controlled smile. Only now her head tilted slightly to the left, as if acknowledging my attention. My hands trembled as I switched lenses, trying to rationalize. Digital artifacts happened, sensor glitches. Maybe something about the mirror's old silver backing created interference patterns that the camera interpreted as human forms. I'd seen stranger technical anomalies. The 35mm lens clicked into place. I shifted my position, changed the angle, adjusted the exposure settings. Through the viewfinder, empty hall. On the LCD screen after capture, the woman, now with her head tilted right, that same fixed smile, but her eyes, God, her eyes seemed to track something beyond the frame. I spent the next hour shooting that hallway from every possible angle. Wide shots, tight crops, different focal lengths. She appeared in every single frame where the trumeau was visible, always in period dress, always smiling, never in the same exact pose. In one image, her hand rested on what would have been a side table, if a side table had existed in that empty space. In another, she appeared to be mid-step. The hem of her dress caught in motion that shouldn't have been possible in a still photograph. The metadata revealed nothing unusual. No manipulation timestamps. No evidence of layered files. The XIF data was clean. Every image shot today, in sequence on my camera. I even checked the raw files on my laptop, examining individual pixels for signs of tampering. Nothing. She was simply there, embedded in the image data as naturally as the walls and floors. By the time I'd finished photographing the rest of the house, bedrooms, kitchen, the narrow servant's staircase, the sun had shifted to deep afternoon gold. I found myself avoiding any room with reflective surfaces, shooting around mirrors, angling away from windows. But the job was the job. The realtor needed a full set by tomorrow's showing. I returned to the main hall for one last series. Maybe if I understood the pattern, I could explain it. I set up a time-lapse, programming the camera to shoot every 5 seconds for 3 minutes. 36 frames of that mirror, that hall, that impossible woman. She moved between every shot. Not dramatically, subtle shifts that suggested life, breath, presence. Her smile never wavered, but her posture changed as if she were having a silent conversation with someone just outside the frame. In frame 12, she raised one hand to her throat. In frame 20, she appeared to be laughing, though her mouth remained closed. By frame 30, she had turned partially away, showing her profile, one eye still visible and fixed on something I couldn't see. Frame 36 made me pack my equipment immediately. She faced the camera directly, not the mirror's angle, but my camera itself, and her smile had widened to show teeth. That night I sat in my home office, staring at the images spread across my dual monitors. I'd isolated every frame containing her figure, enhanced them, studied them until my eyes burned. The period details were impossibly accurate. Buttonholes hand-stitched, lace patterns consistent with 1870s techniques. Her jewelry, barely visible in some shots, showed the kind of mourning brooch popular after the Civil War. Human hair woven into an intricate pattern behind glass. I researched the house. Built in 1868 by a shipping magnate, sold 6 times over the decades. No reported deaths, no tragic histories, nothing to explain what my camera had captured. The current sellers had inherited it from a distant relative and never lived there. They just wanted it sold. My email to the realtor was carefully worded, technical language about compositional choices, Aesthetic considerations. I attached the edited versions with every mirror cropped out or digitally replaced with period-appropriate furniture. Professional. Clean. No trace of her. The realtor responded within an hour. Perfect. The sellers specifically requested no mirrors in the photography. Forgot to mention that. Glad you caught it. Specifically requested. The words sat heavy in my mind as I prepared for bed. How many photographers had they hired before me? How many had captured something in those reflections? At 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. An email from an address that was just a string of numbers. No subject line. One attachment. It was my photo, frame 36 from the time-lapse sequence. But she wasn't looking at the camera anymore. She was looking at me. Not at where I'd been standing when I took the photo, but at me. Now, sitting in my dark bedroom. Her eyes focused on the exact spot where I held my phone, and her controlled smile had become something else entirely. Knowing. Waiting. I deleted the email, but it reappeared in my inbox. Deleted it again. It came back. Blocked the sender. A new numbered address. Sent the same image. My phone gallery began filling with variations I'd never shot. Her in my hallway mirror. Her reflected in my bathroom medicine cabinet. Her watching from the black screen of my powered-off television. I stopped checking mirrors weeks ago. Covered them all with sheets, like sitting Shiva. But sometimes I catch glimpses in unexpected surfaces. Shop windows, puddles, the polished chrome of my car bumper. She's always there, in that same Victorian dress, with that same controlled smile. Waiting in the reflection while the real world stays empty. The house sold yesterday. The realtor called to thank me. Mentioned the new owners were planning extensive renovations. They want to restore all the original mirrors, she said, especially that beautiful Trumeau in the main hall. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, staring at my computer's black screen, working up the courage to turn it on. Because I know what I'll see in that brief moment before the display illuminates. Her face, superimposed over mine, our features beginning to merge in the dark reflection. Her smile becoming my smile. Her eyes replacing my eyes. Sometimes I wonder if I ever left that Victorian mansion. If maybe I'm still standing in that hall, eye pressed to my viewfinder, while something that was never quite human poses endlessly in an antique mirror. The camera keeps clicking, but I can't lower it anymore. Can't step away. Can't stop seeing her in every surface that throws back light. My reflection hasn't looked right in weeks. The features are mine, but the expression, that controlled, measured smile, belongs to someone else. Someone who stood in that same hall, perhaps, over a century ago. Someone who also couldn't stop looking into that Trumeau mirror, even as they felt themselves disappearing into its silvered depths. The email comes every night now, always at 2:47 a.m. The image changes slightly each time. Microscopic alterations that shouldn't matter but do. Tonight she's wearing my clothes, holding my camera. Her Victorian dress draped over a figure standing just behind her, barely visible in the mirror's tarnished edges. A figure that looks exactly like me, trapped forever in that gilded frame. Smile frozen and controlled while she takes my place in the world of real objects and sharp shadows. I check the time, 2:46 a.m. My phone is already buzzing.